Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of the St. Croix County Government. I notice that several folks are still in the process of signing in, so we'll give you another minute or so to do that, and then we'll get underway. This is a first for most people, so we'll take an extra minute or so at the beginning. Christine can also help if people need some help. Ken is giving some assistance now. So we'll get going in about another minute or so. And if you can't get signed in, Christine will know you're here. We'll just do it manually. So those who have signed in electronically, that's just fine. And we'll also do it manually for those who haven't gotten in by the time we start. Yeah. No.
So we got as good as we're going to get for now.
Okay, I guess all of us who are here have gotten signed in. It's a first for everybody. Thank you for your patience on that. We have a couple of our colleagues who are running just a little bit late. They'll join us later, but we'll get underway now. So we'll consider the roll call has been completed, and does anybody have any amendments or suggestions to the minutes of our last Committee of the Whole meeting of April 25th? Seeing none, the minutes of that meeting are approved. We'll now go to our business items. The only thing I'm going to say on that is, again, we're in a Committee of the Whole today, and the purpose of the Committee of the Whole is to give us the opportunity to receive information in a more informal way than we typically do at a formal board meeting, to have conversation, to ask questions, and the only thing I would ask is that we do it in the normal way we've done it, and that's very civilly and conversationally with everybody, and get as much out of this as we can. We've got some major items on the agenda today. We have no votes on the agenda. We don't vote at the Committee of the Whole in the normal sense of a resolution. So everything we talk about today, you will see again at your committees. You'll see it again at the next board meeting when we approve the KIP. You'll see it again in November when we approve the final budget. So there are at least 3 opportunities technically to have further input to the process. But the major ones are at your committee and at the next board meeting in September when we approve the KIP budget. So with that, I'll just say our first 4 items are kind of bunched as informational briefings, one on the new primary care medical facility here at this building, the Eckerd Park plan, the highway maintenance facility for Hudson, and the government center jail expansion that's 4 years out, but needs to be considered now and talked about. And then we'll move into the finances of the county. And I think what we're going to see is we're doing pretty darn well. We've got a lot of debt, but our debt levies as a result of what we might do in the first 4 items don't go up that much. So Ken will give an in-depth briefing on that, as will Ehlers. And then we'll do our normal paddles for a variety of projects that we normally do when we consider the KIP. So it's probably about 20 items that I asked Ken to highlight that were significant dollar amounts and were not routine things that we approve. So that's kind of how we'll unfold today. So I'm going to turn it over to the administrator now to introduce 4 different members of the county staff to make presentations. We'll start with Ken.
Yep, and I was just up here trying to get something else to show. I was going to show the board portal for what we normally display on there, the public portal one, Christine. I couldn't bring it up over here, but... Oh, all right. There's still some technical challenges we're working through with the new system, so today's a good test for that. Now we know what's broken. So we're going to get into the business items here, though, but the first up will be Leif Larson, our benefits analyst. So come on up, Leif, and tell us all about what an on-site clinic is.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. As Ken said, I am St. Croix County's benefits analyst, Leif Larson, and I spent a lot of the last 9 months building out and discussing what an on-site direct primary care clinic is. So I wanted to take the time to kind of take a step back and brief you guys as the board as far as what a direct primary care, or we're also using the term on-site clinic, is, and how it can benefit not only the employees but the county as well. What direct primary care is it's a clinic that is funded directly by the county. So in essence, we are paying the doctors to offer primary care services, say office visits, labs, immunizations, directly to our staff. So we're making that clinic available and we are paying the doctors directly. By doing this, we take the insurance company out of the middle. The idea then is that the kind of the 2 big goals of the primary care clinic would be, first, to provide employees a high level, high quality of care at a cost-efficient price to them, along with reducing the county's healthcare costs as a whole. The way that the clinic works is that we basically will pay a set fee. We will contract a fee with whatever vendor we choose, and then that will be the fee that we are responsible to pay for the entire year. Out of that clinic, then, employees will have unlimited visits, labs, immunizations, medications, all are covered under that fee. Labs are passed back to the county at cost, which is about pennies on the dollar as far as what it would be if those labs or immunizations were provided in a traditional healthcare type setting. So one of the primary reasons why I'm here is I need to illustrate how the health plan can achieve cost savings. The primary care clinic does that through kind of direct routes and indirect routes. So direct is claims diversion, which would be basically whatever people are seeing in a traditional healthcare setting immediately moves over to that direct primary care and is no longer hitting our health plan. So all the office visits, preventative care, labs, immunizations, people are already getting those in their traditional healthcare setting, but we're able to move those under the direct primary care clinic Therefore, and it's all kind of covered under that overarching contracted fee that we have with the providers. Switching over to the other side, there's kind of indirect claims avoidance. And some of this is because of the way that the direct primary care model works. The biggest one is we'll have less specialist referrals. In the traditional healthcare setting, if you go in and see your primary care doctor, they have a certain script that they follow. And if you have a condition that doesn't fall within that script, they're going to refer you out to a specialist. In the traditional healthcare setting, that is absolutely to their advantage. Now, all of a sudden, you have a primary care visit along with a specialist visit, so they get to reap the rewards of that. They're also always going to refer to a specialist within their healthcare network. With a direct primary care, though, all these doctors are trained to be doctors. So they're able to work, they like to use the term, at the top of their license. So they will try and be able to treat a lot of the stuff that's would normally be treated at a specialist level in the traditional healthcare setting. They're able to treat that in-house. Now, there will be some specialist referrals if there is something that is outside of their scope, but again, the goal is we can hopefully avoid some of those specialist visits by them working at the top of their license. Additionally, by kind of owning the clinic, we can also steer employees towards high-value providers. So if an employee needs a surgery, we can steer them to an outpatient surgery center that might do that surgery substantially less than, say, at a hospital. And so by kind of working with the provider, the county can achieve cost savings by directing staff to have that surgery done at what we term high value, which is a high quality of care at a cost-efficient price. The other piece around direct primary care is that the way that they approach care is very different. They approach care from what the insurance will cover or how they will bill that to what the patient actually needs. So whenever the doctor is in the room, they will make sure that not only that the patient is fully on board with the treatment plan going forward, that also allows them more time to treat chronic conditions, more time in education. A lot of times in the traditional healthcare setting, if you have a chronic condition, you'll see your doctor for your 15-minute annual physical, and that's all you're going to see them for. That may not be, you're not going to be able to cover everything related to your chronic complex condition within that 15-minute appointment. So with a direct primary care, it really changes the dynamic to being more patient-focused, and because of it being patient-focused, we see better results for those that have those chronic conditions. By owning the clinic, it also allows us to be able to dictate when the hours are. And I have 3 young kids at home. I am distinctly aware I know when urgent cares are open in the area. I live in Roberts, so I know for urgent care, I always have to come to Hudson because there's one urgent care that's open. If I miss that window, I'm having to go into the emergency room. And so with the direct primary care, because we have an ownership stake in it, we can kind of work with them to figure out hours that work best for us. This is especially important for our group considering we have 24-hour shops with the sheriff's office and with our healthcare campus. So we can figure out hours that work best for our entire population, not necessarily those that work 9 to 5. Also, some of our vendors also have, one of the vendors we're looking at does have a medical weight loss program, which, again, here in America, we are generally heavier, for lack of a better way to put it, and they have specialized programs to help people kind of take that weight off and keep it off, which then, again, results in less claim costs going forward. The one thing I wanted to bring up, I know at the last board meeting we had talked about Chippewa Falls Area School District. They are really the case study as far as what the direct primary clinic can do especially within a public institution. So they were one of the earlier adopters of a on-site direct primary care clinic. They opened one in July of 2017. And it has been really successful for them over time at reducing their healthcare spend. What's really interesting, though, is that they have a lot of the similar challenges that we have here at the county, and they have a lot of similarities. They have about 1,400 people on their health plan, which is right about where St. Croix County is at currently. About 50% of their staff actually live more than 20 minutes away from the clinic. They're teachers, because they're their school district, and a lot of their teachers actually live in Eau Claire, which is about 20 minutes from their clinic in Chippewa Falls. They also have an elementary school that's up in Jim Falls, which is about 15, I think it was 17 minutes away from the clinic as well. So they are kind of spread out, similar to where we are at the county here as well. Also, the other added thing is they have a private clinic, which means that's going to be open only to their staff, but it is operated by one of the vendors that we are looking at. So again, they have the kind of that infrastructure in place that we can kind of leverage. But this is the reason why we like to look at Chippewa Falls, because when we talk about healthcare spend, we talk about either flattening the curve or turning the curve around, for lack of a better way to put it. So what the amount that you see on the chart on the screen is the actual medical spend, which includes the cost for their medical plan, along with the cost for the on-site clinic. And then the blue line shows a trending increase of 8.5%. Generally speaking, in most cases, the average increase on healthcare spend is anywhere from 7 to 11% on an annual basis. So that kind of gives you kind of what the average trend would be. Another thing I wanted to mention here is between 2015, 2016, they also had a substantial increase in claims experience, similar to what we have for 2024. And so they ended up doubling their deductible between 2015, 16, 16, 17. So that's that drastic decrease. The good news here is that since 2016, 17, after they doubled their deductible, they have not increased premiums, increased deductibles, or increased out-of-pockets since they made that change, and that's also when the clinic had opened. So what the biggest reason why we want to do this is we want to take claims expense off of the plan. So the following slides that I'm going to talk about here show Chippewa Falls the actual claims that are hitting their health plan. So this takes out the expense that they're paying for the clinic, but it really will show you kind of what we're trying to drive at here. So whenever we look at health insurance costs, we look at it on a per member per month basis. How much is each person charging the plan that's on the plan? And you can see that downward trend from when they opened the clinic back in 17, 18 down to 2022. Same with preventative care. You can see when they opened the clinic, the trend is moving downward. It's because, again, preventative care is one of the things that directly would come off of the health plan if we open the on-site clinic. Office visits. So these are going to be more of your kind of I'm sick visits, the strep throats, the sinus infections, etc. Again, the whole idea here is that we're taking claims that are at relatively more expensive healthcare providers and taking them off of the health insurance plan. Labs is the same thing. Now with labs, they're a little bit different because with labs, we do get them passed back to us at cost. It's not included as part of that full expense. However, I can say it's about 10 cents on the dollar as far as if you were to get it done at a traditional healthcare clinic versus if it was done at the on-site clinic. It's about 10 cents on the dollar. I do have a slide that shows that. So here is the bars on the left show the total lab costs if they were done through the Cardinal Healthly Clinic versus if we had those same labs done at a traditional healthcare provider. In a nutshell, that's how the county can benefit from an on-site clinic. Because the idea is that over time, the more time that the clinic is in place, the more we can kind of flatten that curve and stabilize the health insurance plan and health insurance costs.
Thank you, Leif. So I've got a question that I'll pose to you and to Ken. Bottom line, Ken, what's the cost of this, and when will we start to recover the cost? What are the bottom lines in money?
Yeah, the bottom line of why we want to do the on-site clinic is health insurance represents 10% of the total county budget. So, we're a service-driven organization, and health insurance is the largest benefit that we provide. So that's 10% of the entire budget is health insurance. So that's why we spent some time talking about it. If we can flatten the increases in that 10% of our budget, that's helpful overall for the budget. So that's why we want to do the on-site clinic, is to reduce future healthcare costs in our self-funded plan. The cost to build out the clinic, we're estimating currently at $850,000. And I don't see Chris Boston here, which is good, because I think he overestimated that cost. We think it'll come in under that $850,000, but that's the capital cost. We have the shell of the clinic already built. It's between the sheriff's office and the jail entrance, an exterior entrance into the clinic. The on-site clinic's been planned for years. When we originally decided to do the addition onto the government center, we talked about that. It was purposely included in there, but that we would continue to evaluate it. So we have evaluated it, we've recommended it. The admin committee has approved the concept of it. So now we need, the last step is the capital part funded, the $850,000 to build out the interior. It's about 2,000 square feet roughly. It'll be built out for a medical clinic setting, and we will then lease that space to a private vendor or contract specifically with a vendor for that space.
We're open for questions to Ken or Leif. Supervisor Ramberg.
Thank you, Chair.
And I was going to say, just for questions in the future, you can address them directly to Leif or to Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one's for Leif. How is online urgent care in the mix? Because I think last time I did it for my poison ivy, it took 15 minutes total, and I went in and got, that was really slick, really fast, and does it avoid some of these things?
So actually, with a lot of the vendors that we are looking at, they also have a virtual option, and specifically even ran out of the clinic, the existing clinic. So yeah, that will be an option, and then frankly, that will be an option. Probably with, even though I know we're going to need, Ken kind of mentioned this, is that I think the timeline on this is going to put us more towards, if approved by you guys, is going to put us more towards late spring, early summer for completion. That virtual option would be available probably day one.
And just to follow up, do we know the average miles away from the facility of our employees?
No, I don't know it offhand. So one of the, I will kind of speak a little bit to that, the distance piece. So we are aware that one of the biggest challenges for us is that we're spread out. And so a lot of the vendors that we're looking at, we're trying to be creative around not only necessarily having access to a clinic in Hudson, but also trying to get creative with existing space in New Richmond, as well as one of the vendors that we actually are looking at has already existing infrastructure in Menominee. So for a lot of our highway staff that live on the east side of the county, they could actually have access to Menominee Clinic or the Hudson Clinic. So yeah, we're getting creative around that.
Supervisor Van
50%
Summeren.
of our employees work at the government center, so they work where the clinic is.
Supervisor Van Summeren.
Thank you, Chair. How about in our $850,000 build-out, how about things like CT scanners and all of those kinds of machines that every other clinic and hospital has? Are they going to be included in this, or is that something you're going to send people out to a different place to have, or how comprehensive actually is this clinic?
Good question. So they can do labs, medications, immunizations, anything imaging, they're going to be referred out. Now we're working through that method. We're kind of working with, I have conversations out with some of the local area hospitals and things like that to see if we can have, kind of a direct pipeline. So we're trying to address that piece as well. But yeah, it won't have any imaging, x-rays, anything like that.
Supervisor Shirley.
Another thing that we talked about in admin committee was the idea of maybe our New Richmond staff or Baldwin, we could possibly, we haven't figured it out yet, create a room that they could use for virtual visits there so that they don't have to come in if they don't need to, too.
Supervisor Leif.
Question about medications and pharmacy. So will this clinic have your set of medications? Will it have a pharmacy?
Not a full pharmacy, but they
Okay.
can dispense medications through the
So with the policy, I know with a policy that I'm on, I have copays for my medication depending on the tier of medications. Does that go away?
So
How does that work?
The advantage of the on-site clinic is nothing runs through the health insurance in any form or fashion. So if they dispense the medication through the clinic, it's free of charge to the employee. If it needs to be filled at an external pharmacy for whatever reason, which they can, they're doctors, they can prescribe at any pharmacy, at that point it would run through health insurance and apply to whatever copays or expenses they would have. But anything administered through the clinic would be free of charge to the employee.
Supervisor Rice.
Yes, a follow-up question. The use case that you presented was really impressive, but one of the things that I noticed, you talked about the deductible was doubled, and that's one of the reasons for the downward trend in expenses. Do you know what the dollar amount was on their deductible when it was doubled?
I don't know offhand. I did have a conversation with them. It's on. I think it's in my notes at my desk somewhere. I don't know exactly how much it was, but they doubled their deductible,
Okay.
and they were on not a high deductible plan,
Okay.
but somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so not like a $5,000 deductible?
No, it was somewhere in the middle.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Hanson.
So I've had the unique opportunity to visit with Dr. Usher about the business model on this. He's a fellow who owns one of these companies, and I suspect that the business that we provide for the company needs to actually sustain a certain level of profit. Is the county going to write a guarantee that we'll provide a certain number of dollars for the company, and how is that going to will we also then make a guarantee when it comes to urgent care that they'll provide services whether or not people are coming through the door? And then will we be passing that cost on to employees, or will the county pay for that, and how will that impact employees? What I'm saying is, will it be a constant cost for employees, or is there a variable cost? Because the variable costs will be of importance to the business that comes in, the medical business that comes in offering the service, but it's going to be very important to employees that there's not a variable cost as it goes along. You understand the nature of the question?
Either of us can talk on that. So I think, so to answer the way that from Dr. Usher, Interesting Reform Medicine is one of the vendors that we're looking at, and likely the vendor, if I'm being honest. As far as what we owe to them as the vendor, we sign a contract. So we will give them, they tell us the number, we come to a mutually acceptable number, and what's in that contract is what both sides agreed to. And it's on them to be responsible as far as if they're going to make a profit or not. Again, they tell us how much money we spend, we will pay them. As far as your question around variable costs, so anything at the clinic, the cost for the employees will be fixed. So they are going to, for office visits, it's going to be free for them to see a doctor, regardless if it's an urgent care type visit, preventative care visit, it's going to be absolutely free. If they're on the traditional plan. If they're on the high deductible plan, it's going to be a $10 copay charge, because we do have to legally charge that under IRS rules in order to make sure that the IRS is happy and satisfied. So that will be a fixed cost for them. Any medications, immunizations, labs, those are going to, again, continue to be free for the employee. As far as labs, medication, and immunizations, those will be a variable charge back to the county, because, again, those are charged back at cost. So we will, again, if you go in and get a thyroid test, I know they run about $120 if you go in and get one through Hudson Physicians. That same thyroid test might be $10 actually at cost. So that $10 is what would be passed back to the county. Did that answer your question?
It did. I'm concerned about the nature of urgent care.
Yep.
And the scope.
So urgent care, again, they will, if it's anything imaging related, they're going to refer that out. But regardless of if it's, say, urgent care for sinus infections or anything else like that, if it can be handled in an office setting, in a traditional healthcare setting, it can be handled at the on-site clinic.
Supervisor Ramberg.
This one's for Ken. Ken, when we were talking about the plan perimeters and the deductibles, how is that determined in St. Croix County, and at what point do we weigh in on it as far as when we change plans?
Sorry about the noise from the dentist office. So, yeah, so the question is, when does the county board? On-site dental clinic, yeah, construction. But, so when does the county board weigh in on the perimeters of the plan in design and scope of it? So that's delegated to the administration committee. We just reviewed it a week or two ago, and the administration committee approved the scope and the offering of health insurance benefits in our self-funded plan for 2025 last week. And from that design, the premiums are then calculated by the actuary. So we don't actually pick the premiums, you pick the design, and the design dictates what the premiums will be.
Just as we'll get right to you. Just as a follow-up, Ken, could you I reviewed very briefly in my introductory remarks the process we were in, the state we were in. You just commented on what the admin committee had done. Could you just take us through the next step or two as to what this body will have to do?
Yeah, so the next steps, as far as the clinic is concerned, are you asking specifically about the clinic?
Yes.
All right. So the admin committee has approved the concept of the clinic. So I have to have both the approval to do a clinic and the space to do it in. So I need two pieces. So the one piece is done already. So the second piece is then through this body and through the county board. We're going to review the capital projects today. We're going to recommend those projects to the administration committee, who then packages a KIP plan into the form of a resolution. At their August meeting, that goes to the September county board. The September county board then adopts the KIP plan for the next 5 years. Really, that's kind of committing us to the 2025 projects, and we're going to start planning for those projects at that time. That does become a supporting document in the overall budget, which is officially adopted in November. At that point, it's a done deal. We're starting to spend that money at that point on those projects. So between now and September, and then really officially in November, is the final approval.
Call on Supervisor Barkalow and then Supervisor Shirley, and then.
Your mic.
Right. What we're trying to do is give Ken guidance. So after the next three questions, we're not going to cut anybody off. We might, at that point, raise our paddles one way or the other and give the suggestion to Ken. Will we have the space for Ken to fill out that second part of what he's asking for? So we'll start with Supervisor Barkalow and then go around the horn as we just mentioned.
So my question's for Leaf. So you would have a defined process for, say, broken arm. You know, that'd probably be an ER visit most likely. Any other imaging, like, I don't know. What else?
I mean, they have defined processes. I leave that up to the doctors as far as how that process handles. What we're trying to work through is to see if we can work with the local providers to give us a kind of a decent pricing on that imaging in exchange for, all of the clinic referrals go to that place.
Yeah, so everybody would coming in would know ahead of time, if you're going to if it's something, X-ray related, go see Hudson physicians first.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, typically the challenge would be that they probably would need to be seen at the clinic first because they'll need to order that particular scan. So that would have to typically be the processes of that. If they need it, they'll be seen. Now, again, broken arms, that's a different animal. You go into the emergency room. But if it's something for your ongoing care, the doctor in the clinic will write the referral to Hudson physicians or whatever, and then they would get the scan done. Scan would then be sent back to the clinic.
I just wanted to mention again, I think Ken touched on it briefly, but basically what we'd be approving with this would be the upfront money for the build out, but then we're gonna have a lease with them to recoup that money as time goes on. So we're just providing the upfront money for it, but we'll be recouped on it too.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to use up all three of my questions. Thank you. We only have one example that we're using from Chippewa Falls. Is that correct?
I mean, we have other examples. So Dunn County, for example, there was a recent write-up which was in the local newspaper of the success that they have had as well. A lot of private industries. I know there's a conglomerate in Baldwin of a lot of the local employers there, and we have all had conversations with them. Again, it hasn't necessarily. I don't have necessarily shared the dollar amount. Again, it helps having a public entity that has it because we can actually see that information. So that's why we use Chippewa Falls. But there are a lot of other examples in this area of direct primary care being successful.
Thank you. And my second question is for Ken. What is the current, and just his due diligence on this issue, what's the current burden of healthcare cost by the county employee on a monthly basis today?
By the employee right now, are you talking single or family?
Well, let's see both. I'm looking at.
I know family because I'm on that plan. It's about $200 a month.
Okay,
for
so
premium, and I'm just talking premium. I'm
so
not
that's,
talking deductibles.
yeah, right, your premium. So that's fairly reasonable.
Correct.
In example, my wife is retiring from St. Paul Public Schools. It's a union contract, and they pay $300 a month. And I see the cost going forward here could really get out of whack, and then we're stuck into this. The other one is, you've talked about contracts, but what are we looking at? We're looking at a $1.25 million investment, and then what are we going to look at? We never cover maintenance on anything we do. Rarely, very rarely. What's the annual cost to operate this on a yearly basis?
Yeah, as far as the building space, I mean, it's about 2,000 square feet. It's going to have its separate heating and cooling unit. I don't know if we're going to meter that separately or not. I don't know if Taylor knows that answer. But I mean, in the big picture of the size of the government center, that's a very small piece of the heating and cooling. As far as any cleaning and stuff, they're basically a private entity that's renting space from us, so they're going to take care of that. So I anticipate very little annual cost. As the landlord, yeah, you would be responsible for replacing the flooring or something like that as it wears out, but that'd be quite a ways down the road.
I think I was, excuse me, I think I was more concerned with the contract part of it, because just like software contracts right now, we're at the mercy of that software company.
Yep.
If they tell us it's an extra 20% this year, that's what we pay.
Yep.
And I can see that the cost is still going to go up everywhere. Ours got to go up too, and I don't know when. I'm having a hard time making that decision to say that this is really going to be cost effective. Thank you.
I can go ahead, Ken. So I think the advantage to the on-site clinic is we're contracting out for 3 years at a time, and we're setting that cost now. And as I kind of shared, the average trending healthcare increase is 7 to 10%. So we're locking in a 3-year cost right now. Now, kind of to answer your question, it just depends who we want to pay. Is kind of the way we sort of see that. Do we want to pay where we have the contracted rate through the direct primary care, or do we want to send our employees to Hudson Physicians, Health Partners, Western Wisconsin Health, who they also can dictate their costs, but their costs are going to continue to escalate as well. So the idea behind the contract here is actually to help kind of insulate the cost and keep the costs more fixed over a period of time than, to your point, kind of being at the mercy of the healthcare providers in the area.
Rick, did you have a third question, or did that cover all your questions? I'm good. Okay, great. Supervisor Barklow.
I want to piggyback on Supervisor Ortino's question. So on a 3-year contract, are we able to get other bids from another entity in the year 2 and see if it's feasible to change horses, or are we stuck with the same horse?
We could, yeah. I mean, we could if it's absolutely not working. I mean, there is leases and stuff. There's going to be other audibles, other factors at play here. But yeah, I mean, similar to any health insurance plan administrator, we can look at those on a year-to-year basis if it really isn't functioning for us.
I think we've had good discussion on this issue, and it's the second time we've been briefed fully as a group. And so at this time, if there's, I'm going to just suggest we give Ken our indication as to our support. Remember, at the end of the day, when we end up making the final votes on this, it's going to require a 3/4 vote to bond. So we're going to require 15 actual votes when the time comes 2 months from now, or 4 months from now in December, when we actually take the vote. But this gives Ken an indication of our support. So at this time, if there's no further questions, if nobody's being cut off, I'm going to suggest we raise our paddles and green for endorsing the concept and space, red otherwise. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Lee, for a very good presentation, and Ken for your support. The next thing will be a major project coming up on the New Eckerd Park, and it'll be Ken and Jason.
All right, good morning, everybody. So I'm here today because the Community Development Committee asked our staff to take and look at some low-cost alternatives to developing the first phase of the park. And they were mainly looking at walking trails for the area for people to be able to use. So just to recap, the county board approved a master plan that had quite a bit of development potential back in 2022. So here's where the property is. It's along the St. Croix, just north of the village of North Hudson. It is accessed by old Highway 35. So over the last couple of years since COVID, there's a lot more people going to our parks, and they're wanting those natural green space areas. But from Eckerd, there's actually 51% of our county population that live within 10 miles of the park, and almost 80% that live within 15 miles of the park. Now, these are based off from the 2020 census numbers, so they're fairly accurate, but those numbers are probably even higher right now. A couple of the key property features: the county started acquiring this property almost 10 years ago, and it's a total of 170 acres in size, and it has roughly 2,800 feet of shoreline along the St. Croix. With that frontage along the St. Croix, there's a lot of deep ravines, almost 3,000 feet of bluff line, and a mixture of mature hardwoods and conifer forest, along with the existing Eckerd cabin that was built in the 1970s. This table just shows you what the current master plan included. Again, like I said, it was more development intensive with 17 camper cabins, 7 yurts, and 13 hike-in campsites. Some other challenges with the existing master plan is the actual zoning in the area would probably prevent a lot of this from happening because the towns have their own zoning, and then we have special regulations along the St. Croix River. I apologize for the smallness of this map, but this shows you the existing master plan concept. It has an access coming in from New Highway 35 off the north side of the property, kind of the entrance building here along the eastern border of the property, a large parking area up on the north. Those 13 walking campsites were laid out on the northern chunk of the property here. Then the camper cabins, and that the 17 of them with the 7 yurts, were all focused in that down on the south end. So there's a fairly high density of camping development on the south. So back as part of this master plan, there was significant public input through the committee, through open houses, surveys. And so I'm just highlighting the survey responses that we had. We had 647 responses, and really there was 7 areas of priority that were identified through those surveys. And we believe that our new phase 1 concept would meet 6 of these. The only one that we wouldn't be meeting would be the flush bathrooms, but that could be an easy amenity that could be added down the road. So just internally, so I apologize on that for the formality of this map, but we took that initial concept and broke it down into a much smaller scale. With the property, though, there's several challenges that do need to be addressed with any development that would ever happen out there. One is the access to new Highway 35. And so right here, this is old 35 that goes along here. There's about a 15-foot increase in elevation here to get up to new Highway 35. This is where the original master plan showed the entrance to be. In the last 6 months, we went out to the town of St. Joe, had conversation with them. They weren't real excited about this access. So then staff went out to the town of Hudson and talked to them about improving the southern access of old Highway 35 here to be more of a type C DOT access to kind of square it up and make it safer. The town of Hudson did do a motion to support improving that access and that southern segment of old 35 up into the park access or the park entrance. Another issue or a challenge on the property is there's 6 houses back along the St. Croix right now, and there's another one being built. And so how are we going to kind of buffer those property owners and that from any park activity and maintain their existing access, which is on the private road here, River Heights Trail? And so this concept has basically a simple Y in the park, where the park traffic would take the northern route here up until the park amenities, and then the existing houses would use their existing road here to access their property just like they do today. Whereas the current master plan has all of those private property owners and that going through the new park entrance building. And so this here should create some easier access for them. Another challenge of the property is just the terrain in general. So this area down here in the south has a lot of deep ravines that drain into the St. Croix. The area north here, and that very, very steep. A lot of it's over 100-foot bluffs, and so the development of those areas are limited at best, especially when you consider the zoning regulations that we have. So what phase 1 would really include is Highway Department has been very generous in that and are willing to commit to helping us with this park development. So they would be doing the actual design of the access here on New 35, and they would actually build up the road and the parking lot. They would also help us in that with our initial trail phase, which would be the trail here in blue. And that trail basically goes along a deep ravine here on the north, goes over to the bluff along the St. Croix, comes back and wraps through the pine plantation area, and then also has some prairie walking. So it's a really nice mix of terrain and scenery in that area. So that would be what they would help us with besides the parking lot and the access. If there's extra funding available, the yellow trail here could be an add-on to phase 1, and that includes a couple swing bridges for amenities and that on site. And we would look at using the military to help construct those swing bridges as well. And the playground equipment, the bathroom, the pavilion, those would all be future construction projects if that's what the new master plan would entail, as grant funds and that were available to help with the construction cost of those projects. And then the red trail, that just really shows kind of what the usability of that area where the current master plan has the entrance building is. That would be another spot for trail development, kind of going along an open field, along an oak ridge, and then back through a pine plantation, and maybe there'd be a sports rec area with some pickleball courts or horseshoe pits. We're not talking full size like football field or baseball fields because that area is just not that big, but it is a nice flat area that doesn't need a lot of earthwork in order to proceed. So this project in general does comply with a natural resource goal in the 2022 to 2025 St. Croix County Strategic Plan. And furthermore, we think that it meets 3 objectives in that plan for the new park opportunities and increasing county natural resources through trails, and then that also supports physical activities for using the parks and trails. So if there's support for this project to move forward, our staff would be looking to amend the master plan for Eckert, and that would include reducing the overall scale of the development and cost of it. It's needed to amend that master plan because we'll need to have a current plan for applying for grants through the DNR and whatever other grants might come available. And at that point, that's when we would go back out, engage with the towns, and have them involved in any of the design tweaks that we might need. And that's at the point where we would engage the neighbors and the property owners in the area, because we didn't want to go out and say, well, this might be happening, and create a bunch of drama that is unneeded, but that would be done. And also the state would be involved with the new access approval. So, and then if approved, 2025 construction, and that upon highway schedule when they could work it in. So that's all I have.
Just a quick question for Ken, just to summarize where we're going on the money. The initial plan for development called for $17 million, and you're indicating that we're going to be revising, the Community Development Committee will be revising that for the reasons you stated. But the ask we're in front of us now is for $2 million, which would be part of any bond we would issue in 2025, and you're looking thereafter at approximately $1 million a year until you've completed your master plan. Is that generally correct?
Generally correct, yes.
Okay.
So we're looking at that.
And
okay,
I'm sorry, I was going to call on Supervisor Leaf. Yeah, okay, Supervisor Leaf.
Did you want to add more to his question?
No, so what we really tried to do, that upfront cost back in 2022 was about $16.5 million. With inflation pressures that we've seen, like on the Highway 35 trail, it could be upwards of almost $20 million. So this first $2 million was really 10%, but it really fixes the challenges of the access. Mm-hmm. It deals with the ownership and having them to have their own access to get back to their properties, and it allows the space.
Yes, so you answered one of my questions about the neighbors and the stakeholders that are nearby, and I have several of my constituents that are among them. And I think this revised plan does address some of the issues that they had initially, which was the access, and so I think this is good. Question about one of the things that came up after the park was kind of approved was that, and Supervisor Counter and I were talking about this earlier, was the hunting issue. So part of we had to allow hunting on this property as part of a DNR funding. So I know that that's been a concern of many of my constituents. It was kind of feels like the Wild West a little bit in there right now. So developing this property would help us solve for that, correct?
Correct, yeah. So we could actually petition areas to be shut off from hunting, and that if we have park amenities and trails in those areas, versus right now we are required to have it open because of that Knowles Nelson grant that we received to acquire the property. So.
Further questions for Jason or Ken? Supervisor Long.
Thank you. I actually get to talk in one of these meetings. Thank you, Jason. Thank you to the committee. I think this plan is fabulous. I think it's so much better than the former approach. And I think I really give you a lot of credit for redoing this. I think it's a great plan, and I'm all for it. However, as I've said before many times, sometimes you got to spend money when you don't want to, and other times you need to kind of hold back. And I think this might be one of those times when we might just want to wait for a little bit, because we've got a lot of other projects going on. We might want to just kind of hold off for another year or so to see where we come out on the KIP next year. We've also, and I think the plan is good. And I really think we need to move forward on it, but adding another $2 million on the bond, I'm not sure is the right thing to do at this stage of the game. So I'm encouraged with the project, but I think it might be worthwhile for us to hold off for another year or so to get a little better idea of where we're at next year.
Supervisor Hanson.
This project is going to benefit a majority of the people who live in St. Croix County. And I've said this before, this isn't about just developing land that we have an obligation to develop because of the agreements we made when the county acquired the land. This is about developing tourism. This is about economic development. This dovetails with Willow River State Park. And Willow River State Park is one of the jewels that we have in our economic development and tourism plan in St. Croix County. Putting it off because we don't want a bond is really stepping over dollars to save dimes. It's time to develop the property so that we can begin to let the people who live in Hudson enjoy the property that was acquired for the purpose of letting the people who live in Hudson enjoy the property. So I think it's time to do that. Thank you.
If I could just share with you the dollar amount that you're talking about then, and Sean Lentz will go over it when we get to the bonding issue part. But so if an average home value is $400,000, $2 million out of that $10 million bond issue is equal to $3, if I'm remembering the chart correctly. But that's the dollar amount you're talking about, is $3 per household is the cost of the $2 million in the bond issue.
Supervisor Artino.
Yes. The chart in the beginning that was by the, I can't remember the name of the company. Thank you, Hallie. It showed the two values. That's the one you're referring to on the left-hand side and the one on the right-hand side. Was that for every single project if we proved everything? Because it was totaled out, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
at $400,000. It was about $120 in increased taxes. Is that
Correct, yeah, that's with both projects in there. So the $10 million bond issue is about $15 per $400,000 household. So we try to look at what an average household would be. So we're saying $400,000. So to borrow $10 million is $15 per year. So $2 million of that is $3.
Okay, and then again, so
Yep,
the
and then-
beginning analysis, was that for everything we got on the board here?
So we're going to do two bond issues by my recommendation. One would be in 2025 for $10 million, and one would be in 2027 for a larger dollar amount. So the larger dollar amount is covering the jail project. The smaller dollar amount is covering the highway project, the park project, and probably a bit of the on-site clinic.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shirley.
I agree that we've worked really hard in community development to come up with this plan, and it's way better than it was. I had a lot of concerns at the very beginning of how this was feasible with the private property owners in the back and how their access was and everything, and we've worked through that. My issue with a lot of today is what our priorities are. So if you look at that Eller's plan from them, where if we approve everything, we're looking at $4.5 million per year additional debt service payments every year. So I think we need to really look at what our priorities really are, and the highway department and the jail expansion are obviously our two big ones, and how we can kind of pare those down and what we can do to do that. I agree with Supervisor Long that I'm not convinced that spending $2 million on the park in 2025 is where we need to be when we have these other big pushes and big strains on on these other asks that we're going to see later today.
Maybe I could just ask this. We're getting a lot of questions on the debt and on the bonds, and that's very good. Sean Lentz from Mailers is here, and I was just going to suggest maybe we should jump out of order a little bit. Let Sean come up, go through the debt issues, our debt levy, the burden on taxpayers, that sort of thing right now, before we go any further with the Highway Department and this issue. So, Jason, thank you very much for a good presentation. And Mr. Lentz, if you could come to the podium and do that, that would be great.
Oh, sure.
Yep. Page 6.
Great. Thank you, and good morning to everybody. I'm Sean Lentz with Ehlers. As has been discussed, we've got some updated slides for you as part of the broader discussion. You're getting a lot thus far on what the capital project costs would be. What we're really hoping to focus on in our section of the presentation this morning in working with Ken is here are the total project costs, but if we do bonding as well as other funding sources, I know you've gotten your total capital improvement plan, what are we doing on a preliminary, what are we seeing on a preliminary basis for the tax impact of proceeding with all of the projects that are being discussed today? And one last thing, if anyone has any questions, if it's fine, with the leadership up there, I'm happy to answer questions as we move through whatever way you guys
Absolutely.
like to do this. But before going into the impact, I thought it might be beneficial to just take a step back. Where are we right now before we would proceed with any additional projects? So a couple ways that we look at the current debt situation for the county is what is the borrowing capacity under state law? And then in a second, we'll talk about what is the current debt portion, debt levy portion for the debt that the county currently has outstanding. So first, the county's debt limit is limited to 5% of the equalized value of the county. And that gives you a capacity of just over $819 million. So you have a significant, because of the large value of the county, borrowing capacity. Now, as of the end of 2024, so what you've already budgeted for debt payments this year, at the end of this year, you'll have about $114 million. And the biggest portion of that is the expansion of the facility that we're in today. So that's the largest portion of that 114. And that leaves you with over $700 million in capacity. Now, another element to always keep in mind is when you borrow money, as I think everyone knows, you have to pay interest on the debt. Interest is greatly affected by the credit rating of the county. And I'm happy to say for St. Croix County, you have an excellent bond rating. It's one step below the very best that you could have, which is AAA. And that's a credit to both elected officials and staff for managing the finances of the county in a very strong fashion. So you're currently at that AA1, and I think it's fair to say, Ken was part of the discussions, there was some consideration about potentially moving the county up to the highest possible rating when we last met with Moody's Investor Service. But after their board made their final decision, they kept us currently at the AA1. Why, again, is this important? Is the better rating that the county has, the lower cost you're going to pay on interest on your debt. Now, the next slide is the one that I think is more important, and this is the one for when you do your budget every year, how much do you need to put on the taxpayers to repay principal and interest on the debt that the county has? So for this year, the total debt service payments that you have for 2024, a little bit under $11 million. And as you can see on the chart, as we go forward in time, as we gradually pay off existing indebtedness of the county, over time that's scheduled to gradually go down. Okay, so this is where we sit today. The other way we look at the total levy, or the total impact of the debt. We have the total levy amount, just under 11 million, and then what we call the debt mill rate, which is simply that levy amount divided by the TID-out equalized value of the county. And so what you're paying on $1,000 of value, if I own a home, $1,000 of value on that, I'm paying about 69 cents for the debt that the county has. This is not dealing with any of the other expenses that you have. This is solely looking at the debt. Now, in working with Ken on the capital improvement plan and the county staff as a whole, currently on the horizon for financing all of the projects, and again, you'll have various funding sources, but within those funding sources, staff has identified the need to do borrowing to fill the gap to completely fund the projects that are on your capital improvement plan. And as I think Ken has already alluded to, and for our modeling, what we've done is expected in 2025, the county would issue $10 million in indebtedness to finance capital improvement projects. And then in 27, there would be a second issue of about $65 million. So those are the two issues we're going to look at here on the slides upcoming. The other thing I wanted to let the board know, we work with Ken and the county staff on, is there any refinancing opportunities where the county could save money by lowering the interest expense that you pay on your debt? Currently, there is not any, but we will continuously monitor that if those opportunities come up. So the next slide is the impact of issuing a $10 million bond issue or note issue in 2025, and then another $65 million issue in 2027. So the impact of doing that would hit in budget year 2026 and budget year 2028. As I'd mentioned, currently the levy for debt for the county in the dark blue bars, about 11 million, a little bit less than that. And then in green would be the impact of adding that 10 million in debt on top of the current debt levy that you have in the dark blue. And then more of the aqua blue would be the $65 million issue being issued in 2027 with the impact hitting in 2028. So if we're at around 11 million currently, going forward, the impact hitting us in 2026, we would expect a total debt levy of about 11.4 million for budget year 2026. And then from the 11.4 million, adding the $65 million issue hypothetically in 2027 would increase the debt levy from 11.4 million to approximately just a bit over 15 million. A couple things, just so you know, assumptions here. We used interest rates that are currently available in the market plus about 0.5% above, so it's conservative in the current market conditions. And both of these issues we repaid over a 20-year term, believing that the useful life of the type of projects that you're going to be putting into the bond issue is certainly within that length of time. So those are the assumptions also built into these models. Okay. Now, this was the one I think that we wanted to get to per the discussions that you've already been having on some of the projects being discussed this morning. And that is with adding the 10 million next year in 25, and then on a second issue basis, the 65 million in 2027, what would be the step up impact on taxpayers from where we are now? So the section, if you're looking down at the page or up at the screen on the left side with the green bars in there to highlight, tying into the green $10 million issue that we talked about on the previous slide. I think Ken alluded to this. If we're looking at a $400,000 median value property in the county, equalized value, the increase from 2025 to 2026 would be about $15.55. So that would be the increase on a taxpayer who owns a $400,000 house of adding the 10 million in debt. And then that same house, $400,000 in 2027 for budget year 2028 would see an additional increase of about $91.13 from the issuance of the $65 million issue being completed in 2027. So it would be two step-ups, one in 2026 and the second in 2028 from the impact of those two issues. One other element I'll mention on this particular slide for the board members is the valuation of the county that we used in doing these projections is projected to stay exactly the same. So that's a very, very, I think, a very, very conservative estimate, given that the county's history has been that equalized value has grown pretty rapidly. And in fact, we'll be able to update this slide for you in about 10, 12 days here when we get the new values for January 1, 2024 come out usually in and around August. So we'll start seeing that those new values start to come out. So this, to the Vice Chair's point earlier, this is the impact that would be from the 10 million in 2025 and the 65 million in 2027 on different property values in the county. And again, using the 400,000 as the median, $15.55 in 2026, and an additional $91.13 in 2028. Okay, and Ken, I don't know if there's anything you'd add to those?
Questions for Mr. Lentz? Supervisor Van Summeren.
Thank you very much, Chair. That doesn't seem like much. One thing we have to consider, though, is everything else is going to go up, too. So, you know, in 2025, it's going to be on a $400,000 house, $15.55. But other expenses in the county is going to raise that tax much higher than that. So we're only talking here about repaying this bond, paying the interest on the bond, paying that.
This impact is just
right.
debt,
So
right.
so just so we don't get that like, well, that's not bad. I can easily, my neighbors can afford to pay that. That's not the total bill. Just want to make that point. Thank you.
If there are no further questions for Mr. Lentz, thank you. Will you be staying with us?
Yes, sir, I can.
Great.
I'll
So
stick around.
we can get you back if we do. Okay, let's go back to Jason. And if there are any further questions for Jason, we can take them now. Otherwise, maybe we can have, I'm sorry, Supervisor Anderson.
I just was wondering, Jason, if you want to talk about kind of what's been paired off of the parks KIP requests in the last year, like the total value, including like some of the capper caverns at other places, stuff like that.
Sure, Supervisor Anderson. So as part of the 2024 KIP request, we sat down with staff and really evaluated all of the park's KIP projects. And just looking at the camper cabins, there was 1.89 million for them, and like another 1.7 in that for a campground expansion last year, and then the 16.5 million for Eckert. And so scaling back the total cost of Eckert to about 6.5 million over the next 4 years, and then reducing the camper cabins, trying to use some of our normal budgetary funds and just kind of scale it in, and that we saved roughly 12.3 million overall in the park's KIP request. So even with the 2 million, there was 12 million shaved off and change. So
Supervisor Rice.
Yes, and if I understand, Jason, we're talking here today about this pared back plan and estimating $2 million in expense to use our own highway department resources to do this.
correct. Everything will be done between community development staff and highway.
Okay, so looking ahead, and this might be a question for our administrator or perhaps Robbie, but can anyone here want to speculate on if we were to defer this project, what it might be 1 year, 2 year, 5 years from now? I can't imagine that it'll be less than what we're estimating today.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to the inflation, and we try to build inflation into a lot of these projects that are a few years out. But we do anticipate on all the projects that inflation is going to continue to increase the cost. So sometimes when we look at a project, and the government center is a good example of that, we knew it was going to be needed. Interest rates were very low, and so the county board at that time said, we're just going to do it. Now is going to be the best time to do it. The construction costs are not going to get any cheaper. The interest rates we knew were on the way starting to go up, and so we did it. So both inflationary cost and bond issuance costs are things that we take into consideration. I think we typically budget about 5% average annual inflation to any of the projects that are multiple years out.
Yeah, I know this project has been been proposed for a while. It got pared back significantly, and I don't know that there will be an appetite generally, because I wouldn't have it, to take a special bond issuance just to get this park started, which is what it's going to take when it comes to all the road work that's required. I think now is the time to do it. I don't know even the highway will be available next year or the year after to do it, and I appreciate them offering to do it. Or not obviously next year, but if we approve this next year, if they'll be available in the future, if and when we eventually approve this project at a later date. So I think we should definitely do this now when there's a plan for another reason to take a bond issuance out anyway. And I can't imagine we can't find $2 million from some of the other projects, maybe not next year, but in 2 years.
Supervisor Attino and then Supervisor Rice again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We switched part of this dollar from one department to another, and I'd like to know, roadways don't come cheap. I'd like to know what the estimate is on that dollar value going from community development over to highway. Thank you.
I don't know if maybe Robbie wants to address it, how that internal transfer works, but you can come on up, Robbie. I just want to make sure you guys are clear of how it works when we pay ourselves for work. So I think that was to Supervisor Ortino's question.
Sure, and the goal is always to limit how much departments are billing each other. We try to minimize that cost of administration. But in most cases, the highway department works for many local partners. In other words, we create an account, we invoice that account, and it's actively just a transfer between the departments. In this case, it would be bond revenue, so we would just create that account, track the bill, monthly bills, and then it's just transferred internally.
And I think that does have a secondary benefit of additional money coming into the highway department. So that money gets to get reused twice by our taxpayers. It's going to get used once by the Parks Department to have highway do it, and highway then uses that money to replace equipment, because part of depreciation equipment's in there, part of our labor cost, and anything that's left over from that is money that they're able to use then to do other highway projects in the county. So when you think about it, you kind of get the benefit twice out of that dollars.
Supervisor Rice and then Shirley.
I agree with the concept that part of what we're voting on today is to give, Ken and our staff some general direction, and that we're dealing with priorities. As I understand it, we still have several steps to go before we declare a final budget and decisions on bonding. So I'm in favor of this, to continue to pursue this and make this part of our consideration. I can only imagine if we kick the can down the road, we're not going to be revisiting this again, and the cost will go up.
Supervisor Shirley and then Barkalow.
My question's for Robbie, if you can come back up.
Just informationally, I'm sensing that probably after 2 or 3 more questions, we'll be able to show the paddles. Then I would think I'll call on on Robbie again to talk about the Hudson Highway facility. Then we'll take a break, and the last full presentation will be by the Chief Deputy, and then we'll move on to the general presentation on the KIP by the Administrator. Robbie.
I'm looking for. I've asked over the years this question, and maybe you can give me a rough idea. So if we're asking for $2 million for this project, how much of that is the entrance piece and that road into the Y?
Can you give me that question one more time?
So how much of the $2 million, roughly, because I'm sure you don't have it on you, is the entry piece, redoing the entry off of 35, the road coming up to where that Y is off to the private drive?
Public road part.
Right.
Correct, so we're talking old 35, and I believe it was about $250,000 from what I remember for the entrance, from what we saw in the latest rendition.
Okay.
So that would be a full type C intersection to service the old 35 entrance. Long-term, both those entrances, there's one on St. Joe's and one, I mean, that's a piece of roadway that needs to be looked at by our local partners. But it would also be solving the transportation problem there.
So part of that 2 million, I think, is abandoning the north side as well, right? So if we were only to improve the south side as an option to scale this back a little further, then we could theoretically redo what would be the main entrance on the south side, bring it into that Y to the private drive, and create a temporary parking lot there.
So there is some concern about that north access of Old 35. So the town of St. Joe has requested that we vacate that if we're going to be attracting a bunch of extra traffic into that area for our park facility. Right now, we've got some temporary parking out there. But of course, when you're taking and building temporary parking and then you're trying to build trails coming off from that, it might not necessarily align with our final plan. So then we might have cost tearing out the trails that we just built to get them into where we actually need them. So, and just when Robbie's got his, dozers and heavy equipment out there, there is some fill on site. It's kind of down in the first corner, the southeast corner of the property, that we could use a lot of that fill to complete the whole project. And then all the stormwater can be built at the same time, and it's kind of all taken care of. And then we don't have heavy equipment going back in there again down the road.
Supervisor Barklow.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Have we done any studies on estimated revenue? For instance, like Perch Lake's pretty close. It would be kind of a comparable site, I imagine. Do we know what we expect to generate from this park?
And I think it's only going to grow, as the amenities are there, but without a playground, without a pavilion, it's just going to be people going there to walk right now. So I don't know, probably less than $100,000 a year, I would say. But as time grows, as we get more, stairs down to the water for water access, some overlooks, some pavilions, and that all with grants, I'm hoping, and that then we should be close to Perch Lake and that, so in that 400,000 range. So total possibly. So it is in the location, and we've been having a lot of problems, and that now with Troy Beach being closed all summer due to the high water, Perch Lake, and that has got a lot of demand. We're working with the town of St. Joe because they're actually backing up on Perch Lake Road all the way out to County Road E. People are walking a half a mile. So that'd be one thing that this new park would take some of the burden off from those other facilities.
Chairman Long.
I'll just reiterate, I love the projects, but again, just remember there are wants and there are needs. And if you took a look at the spreadsheet that we all reviewed, we have a lot of needs. This particular project is a want. We do it when we feel like we have the funds. So delaying it for a year or two really isn't going to do any harm. We could even see if we could absorb it in the KIP next year or add it to the bonding that we're anticipating for the jail. So that gives us some flexibility, but just remember, this is a want, and wants are we fund wants when we feel like we can afford it.
Are there any other questions or observations? Supervisor Connor.
I guess the question I just want to bring into this is one that we discussed right at the beginning, and that's the safety out there, because under the current use, If the park is undeveloped and we continue down that path, I'd like to know, is this land open to rifle? Is it open to shotgun? Is it open to just bow? I'm not sure what the hunting regulations are for it. I know it's 100 and some acres, and there's a lot of residences that are around it, and there's been a lot of complaints. The complaints have been both to members on the board here and also to the community development. So with all that in mind, the concern is if we continue to push this down the road and then there's issues and we have this, we have to also have those considerations too for safety. Safety to me is always a very high priority, and it's something that we need to consider. So my question is, what type of hunting is allowed on there? What has been the general population of hunters that have been out there? And what are the complaints? What have you been seeing for complaints? Is it, I understand there's been where they've got deer and then they go down and they die out in the people's yards and things too. So that's my question.
Sure, Supervisor Coner, I can kind of respond to that. So it is something in that every fall that we deal with, and that with the hunting pressure out there. It basically starts in that with small game and bow hunting. We got a lot of tree stands that are put up in that permanently. We've got a lot of trail cameras that are put out with no name on them and stuff. We've actually got people putting out like water troughs and that to try to attract the deer, baiting regulations. And so we actually created a sign up basically for anybody that's out there hunting that they're supposed to tell us that what their name is, what their DNR tag number is, and where they're hunting on the property, which helped a little bit. And then even last year, opening morning of gun deer season, and that J.R. Ballard, our parks administrator, actually went out there and met with each person coming to hunt and that to take and try to educate them about the park and where the houses were and that and park safety. And unfortunately, we still have abusers of the park rules. And yeah, there's everything in that from rifles to bows, deer. They found several deer now and that down in those deep ravines and that where the deer goes down there and nobody wants to get them out, you know. And so there is some challenges with that aspect.
Supervisor Hanson.
I'd add that without having better roads, the safety is more of a concern. We're required by the DNR to allow hunting, trapping, and even trapping. And as that pressure grows, and it will, because there's less and less public land that allows and is required to allow hunting, then that becomes more of a safety issue. So it's even more of a reason to build those roads. And I think maybe the point was missed earlier that we have less of a case to appeal to the Natural Resources Board to restrict hunting if we don't develop the park. If we develop the park, we have a well-developed case to bring to the Natural Resources Board for us as a county to restrict hunting on that property. As long as it remains wild, if you'll allow the term, we have a very poor case for restricting hunting. And that's the reason that, one of the main reasons that I think we should go ahead and begin the process of developing this property.
Supervisor Shirley.
So there's been a lot of talk about the hunting issues out there. Jason, do you know what the threshold is that would allow us to close off a significant portion of it? Is it the road in or is it the actual trails?
And that I would assume that it'd be a geographical area of the park and that could be shut off. And so like maybe that northern chunk, you know, and that where we don't have any development, and typically that's where we see a lot of people wanting to hunt just because of it, having more deer or whatever. So we would have to appeal to the DNR board and that to see what they would allow us to take out. But I mean, if we got a lot of park users using trails and that, and it's kind of going through the woods, you know, and that there would be safety concerns there, I would assume. But yet we would still be able to allow a designated hunting area up in that northern part, you know, and that to kind of separate it. So it would appeal to both user groups.
If there's no further questions, I think we're probably prepared to show panels. This would just be a show of general support for just the bonding portion of what's being proposed by the Community Development Committee for up to $2 million for the bond that would be issued in 2025. So I would just say, so we're not talking about the years thereafter. That will come up in the KIP discussion that Ken will lead after the break. So I just suggest we have our show of paddles for support of the general concept of the $2 million for the bonding. Well, I try to give Ken an idea of, so he doesn't have to look at the side of it.
10 to 7.
10 to 7.
How about the first one that you voted on?
16 to 1.
I thought so.
You want to know who the one was?
There is one. Now, earlier, Chairman Witt said he was going to get one with both sides green. I don't get it.
So at this point, I'll call on, excuse me, Robbie Croix, our Highway Commissioner, to discuss the bonding portion for the new Hudson Highway facility of $7.5 million. After that, we'll take a break.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we're here to talk Hudson Highway Facility. Hudson Highway Facility, just for everyone's geographical information, is located just off of State Highway 12, just east of Hudson. We'll get right into the nitty-gritty of it. The facility was originally constructed in 1994. That was an era where WSDOT and counties were really partnering, trying to develop some infrastructure so that we were placing resources more where use was. So, for an example, we have 4 outlying facilities. We have one in Hudson, one in Somerset, one in Deer Park, and one in Glenwood. We have an additional salt shed in the town of Katy, which is just north of Highway I-94. But most of these were constructed, are just pre-engineered metal buildings. There's what I would call a glorified storage shed. The US 12 facility is no different. It's 10,000 square feet. It's on a well and septic. It's outside of the current boundaries as far as sewer and water. We don't have any fire suppression system. And as I mentioned, I'd like to highlight this picture because this here is one of our older, when I say older, it's still a good truck, but it's one of our older fleet. You can see the size of it. In the next picture, you can also kind of see some of the construction methods that were used in the 90s on pre-engineered metal buildings. They aren't necessarily designed for what we use the facility for, but it was the current practice at the time. I want to get into a little bit of what the challenges are. So if you look at our top 2 slides, and I put them close together just for reasons. So as salt, to give you an example, this year, our per ton price of salt is approaching $95. To give you an idea, in 94, we were probably looking in the 30s. So as salt prices continue to rise, as some of the environmental effects of more salt use go on, our trucks start to change. And what we've started to do, and the state has been pushing, and for good reason, is start to utilize brine. Brine is just a glorified liquefied salt. We're making it at 23.7% concentration. What it does is it helps us reduce overall salt use. We lose less salt on bounce and scatter, as well as it's already in liquid form, so it's ready to roll. But the trucks have to change. So we go from this single axle truck, which didn't have to worry about carrying brine, to this tandem axle truck, which is significantly larger. This tandem axle truck can carry about 600 gallons of brine as well as 10 tons of rock salt. That truck changes. Now this truck's longer. Now it doesn't fit. Now the plow has to be taken off and stored outside. So now we got an operator coming in, taking his truck outside, hooking up to a cold plow. Same of the issues we had in Hammond that it caused a lot of problems for us with response time. It also just reduces the number of trucks we can store within the facility. Hudson and what I would always say is west of State Highway 65 is our growth area. So as that grows, as Exit 2 continues to develop, as Exit 4 continues to develop, as the highways over here become busier and busier, we'll be staging more of our fleet over here. and we're really limited on what we can do within that Hudson facility. I'd also like to highlight a couple of the things. So you can see some of the insulation challenges here. These facilities were never designed for moisture in the facility, so we'd still wash the truck inside when we can. That creates a lot of moisture content. These facilities just weren't designed to handle it. We tried to combat that with HVAC upgrades. It becomes a real challenge. The bottom picture, I'm going to skirt on slightly. So in the 90s, when we wash trucks or when we get large drainage events within the facility, we never really had that encapsulating plumbing facility necessary to handle that liquid load. What we're seeing is a failure of our drainage system within the building. Regardless of what happens, if we don't move forward with a new facility, we are going to have to be spending money in Hudson because of the code violations that we currently have. It also doesn't have a fire suppression system, and Todd's in the back, just Commissioner, we're making a joke of whether it's too soon to bring that up, but I thought it was worthwhile to mention. We have suffered 2 fires in the Baldwin facility, and what I could tell you is if we were still located in Hammond with either of those 2 fires, we could have lost our entire fleet. So we did build into this building a fire suppression system, which creates challenges. The fire suppression system alone, because you're not on public water, we have to store it in large tanks. It does cost some extra expense and part of the price tag that you see in front of you today. I did highlight this. I apologize for not being in the packet. We have the full report. So what we did at Highway is we reached out to a couple consultants and we asked them to do a facility analysis as well as what are the future needs. And this was just a highlight of all the challenges that came with the existing facility. Any pre-engineered metal building you're looking in the 90s, its lifespan is right approaching the end of life without some significant upgrades. This report talks significantly about the code issues that are present, as well as what we'd have to do to mitigate some of those code issues. And that still doesn't address any of the space concerns that we have with the fleet growing. Apologize for the size. We can get into it a little bit more if you have questions on it. So this is what's being proposed. Before the Transportation Committee, we brought 7 different options for a facility. We looked at everything. We actually had a couple consultants through the years. We looked at salvaging the old facility. And in this scenario that you see, the budget package that's there, this would convert the old facility into cold storage. That allows us to reduce the overall footprint of the new building while still giving us capacity to store stuff that doesn't need to be stored on the warm side. So we're trying to maximize what we get per dollar spent here. The new facility would encompass enough space to allow us to store the equipment that's necessary to be stored in Baldwin or that we'd like to. Right now we are staging trucks out of Baldwin that do service some of the west side of the county. It's just a practical matter where we have storage in Baldwin available. We don't have storage in Hudson, so we're just sending that truck across the county on a snowstorm. We do that now. We would change if this facility was constructed. What I would say is that also adds a benefit. We didn't build Baldwin with a ton of extra room. I'm not saying we're going to have to expand Baldwin anytime in the near future, but what this facility would give us is an extra set of life on that Baldwin facility because we'd have extra stalls available for that future growth. At some point in the near future when Exit 2 gets fully developed, Exit 4, we're going to be adding personnel on the state system. It's just a given with our growth. So a lot of that will be staged out of here, as well as if population estimates are correct, we grow by 50,000 in the next 20, 25 years. What I would tell you is based on a population of that size, we would probably have a 1A and a 1B county facility. This would be your secondary highway facility. I don't think you'd ever have administration out of this facility, but we would move to having permanent staff working out of this facility year round. And that would be at some point in the future when the population just demand requires that. The facility itself does include a chassis wash on the north side. We're making significant investments in our equipment. The ability to be able to wash and properly maintain that is critical. This facility was also built with a wall in place to keep that moisture in the wash, not into where we're storing equipment. It helps with a couple things as well as moisture management within the main facility. On the bottom right, we would have some employee accommodations that we don't have now. I do want to go back to one slide that you can't really see too well, but these are couches our employees utilize. I don't want to tell you where the couches came from, but you can be creative and guess that they were left deposited on the freeway and are repurposed since then. So we'd like to provide some reasonable accommodations. There's nothing extravagant, but this would provide a shower facility as well as a break area within the Hudson facility. Go to the overall site plan. If you look on here, this box represents the existing facility. As I mentioned, we would repurpose that. There is approximately $200,000 to $250,000 in the budget to make that a cold storage facility. That would be to make the necessary improvements. Some of the code issues go away when that becomes a cold storage and it becomes, we don't have the same amount of employee interaction within the facility. These two are existing salt sheds. This does show a future salt shed. These two are state finance facilities. We have little county storage. We would look long-term of a lower cost salt storage option, as well as this would be the main facility on the site. So the site, we're fortunate we have the area here to expand even in the future. We looked very carefully and we challenged our partner in the consultant side to say, if we have to rebuild, expand this facility in the future, I didn't want it to put the county taxpayer money in well spent to where whatever investments we make could be expanded upon as the population demand needs it. So this facility is laid out that way where we'd have expansion to the west. We are looking at a precast concrete. You can take a wall off, expand out. It provides a lot of the options. So now we'll get into the hard news, and that's opinion of probable costs. And I've had a lot of good questions on this. We showed the Transportation Committee costs anywhere from 3.2 up to 7.5, and some of the 3.2 were just addressing some of the code issues in the existing facility. This probable cost, as you can imagine right now, giving building estimates is challenging, especially when you're multiple years out trying to guess what inflation is going to be as well as potential building costs. We worked very hard with both this, Cedar Corp developed this estimate as well as a construction group as far as getting us a realistic business cost. And everybody keeps coming back with the same thing. I keep asking for different answers trying to get the cost lower, but they kept coming back with the same numbers. So at some point you have to accept your consultant's opinion or get a different consultant, right? So we're at this cost. What I would share with the county board is we're going to try to do everything we can to save all the money we can. But right now that's our best guess of what this facility would cost. I went really fast through this, my apologies, but if there's any questions, we'd love to help answer them, or at least we'd say we could get the answers.
Robbie, I'll just pose one to you or Supervisor Tino. This proposal was adopted by the Transportation Committee?
Correct. The
Great.
Transportation Committee did vote unanimously to support this option.
Other questions for Robbie or anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarity. In the KIP plan we have in front of us, the last sentence on that page 15 of 49 says this would include removal of the old facility. That's not correct, is it?
That got removed. That was originally the way that was being proposed, but the designer came up with a way to make that usable space without addressing some of those code issues. And I think the county would be well spent to take advantage of that and reduce the new building space.
Supervisor Burning, and then Supervisor Shirley after that.
The future of EV, electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, is this building conducive to be able to bring power in for charging stations for hybrid trucks down the road?
It would. So this includes an upgrade to the electrical. Where the heavies are going, that's a great question. I wish I had a crystal ball because I'd be buying stock right now, whether the heavy side fleet is going to go full electric or some sort of fuel cell / compressed natural gas. This facility would be capable of that. It's not included in this budget, but the facility would have the power necessary to do that.
Supervisor Shirley?
Yes. Robbie and I, we talked before the meeting, so I know he knows what's coming already. So if we look at what's existing out there, we have a 10,000 square foot building. We have two 4,700 square foot salt storage, somewhere around there. So I think at best, we probably have 3 million worth of existing building is probably what the property is worth. And then some site work out there. So say best case scenario, we have $3.5 million worth of property out there right now. So my issue with this is that we're going to take that 3.5 million and add 7.4. We're going to triple the amount of value of building out there on that site. And I cannot support that. That's too much for what I can see out there. The only thing that I can, and we walked through a lot of these things. A lot of it is some fire protection. Fire protection is hard when you're not in the city, and you have to have the tanks in there. So that's a sizable amount, and I understand that. But I think that we need to pare this down. I could support something smaller than that, and I would also propose that we use the interest on the bond of this building to go towards that building.
And if I may, I did include some of these costs in there. So like the suppression system alone, we're looking at almost $250,000. As well as the main facility itself, we're looking at about $4.2 million. Site development and some of the other contingency fees that are in there make up the remainder. As I mentioned before, I would love to say we could build this facility for less. We did our best to pare down the overall scope by maintaining the old facility as cold storage. That gives us the option of storing those seasonal items in that cold storage area and reduce the overall footprint. But what we're showing you is about 20,000 square feet. There isn't a lot of methods that I know of to build a facility that would serve now and for the next foreseeable future without an expansion there. So right now, I'll give you an example. We don't store a grader in Hudson. Even though we use a grader in the Hudson area most of the winter, we can't storage there. Another great example is our emergency response truck. So our primary I-94 emergency response truck has a crash attenuator in the back. It's set up for multiple lane closures on I-94. We stage that in Baldwin. It's just a practical matter. We can't fit it in Hudson. So if we built this facility, the fleet would move and we'd probably have another truck just like that staged in Hudson, where we do have a lot of demand for traffic shutdowns in a short notice. So this facility would give us some flexibility as well that we just don't have. I certainly understand the frustration with cost. I wish it was different, but.
And Supervisor Barkalow and then Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So, Robbie, we've probably explored other ideas like buying a property in the municipality where we could have access to water, right? I mean, is Richmond an idea? I don't know. That would probably take us too far away from where we need to be. And then buying the land inside the municipality, where you're gonna, how many acres is this property currently? 7?
So this is over 20 acres.
20 acres,
yeah,
so you're not gonna find it. Yeah.
So we like to joke when we looked at the Baldwin facility, we ended up in Hammond and Baldwin because we could buy land by the acre, not by the square foot when you got to Roberts. So the land challenge here, and we're in a great location. We're at the intersection of US 12A. We're just a hop, skip, and a jump from I-94 and servicing that greater metro area. This shop was selected for a reason, to have a location. So location is tough to mitigate that. We did look at, like I said, we had 7 different building options here. It just came down to this was the best long-term investment for the county. And I don't mean to speak for the committee. I mean, that was the committee's recommendation.
Supervisor Hanson, then Adams.
Thanks. The idea of putting it someplace else hadn't occurred to me. Had you talked about maybe this property that we own, the county owns, adjacent to this building? That's land that's been in reserve for a need in the future for decades. Maybe this could be considered for that purpose. It's just putting that out there. And this project is well underway, so that's, I guess, a rhetorical question. The Could you talk about the savings in making these vehicles last longer because we're putting them in a heated garage? Is that dollar-wise, have you projected out the replacement, the period of time that we'll have these vehicles, the replacement cost?
Sure. So any vehicle that leaves our fleet is well loved. So it's already experienced most of its useful life when it leaves our fleet. Most of our plow trucks have a service life of between 20 and 25 years. On the state system, we like to reduce that life to about 12 or 15, and then we cycle it down. The fleet itself, what I can tell you, one of our biggest challenges right now is fleet acquisition. So a new truck, to give you an example, 20 years ago cost us less than $100,000. That same plow truck is well over $3 now. And so we are making those investments and trying to gear the fleet so that it's here for that 25-year life, 20 to 25. So as far as the projection, the real challenge isn't just the projection, it's how do we change our fleet quickly to reduce our salt use, reduce our salt costs, as well as build a maintainable truck. And what I'd give you as an example is when we were looking at Baldwin, it was hard when I first started. We had between 30 and 45 minutes per rotation of a driver to come in, take a truck, hook it up, get out on the freeway. Right now, we walk in, that truck's fueled, ready to roll. They're out on the freeway in under 5 minutes. So we would gain the same thing here at the start and end of each shift. We lose time when we're plowing snow. And so that cost savings over the long period of time is significant.
Thank you, Chair. Supervisor Hanson's question brought out the answers I was going to ask about, so that was great. If any of you have been a part of Clean Sweep, where you've turned in hazardous materials, it goes out to that building. I mean, I've lived in Hudson since 2013, been in there a couple times. That building, you know, scares me just to even drive through to drop the stuff off. So and the use that we're putting on it, and our operators also really shows the need for this building. And those couches, I had no idea that's what we were, you know, causing our operators to use to rest prior to going out on the road. I think, I don't think it was last year, but the year before, I went out on a ride with one of our plow operators. I think Neil, what was his name? And I tell you, that's akin to, you know, low flying a tactical A-10 Warthog going down I-94. And we need our operators to be well rested and have the means to operate those vehicles safely. So the Transportation Committee, we were all here, you know, we did pare this down significantly from the options that Robbie brought us. So I would really ask for support of the board on this particular project. Thank you.
There are no further questions or observations. Oh, one more, Supervisor.
I wanted to say thank you to Supervisor Adams. When you went back to the wants and needs, I want a swimming pool in my backyard. Do I need a swimming pool? It is not the case. This is absolutely needed. You look at the growth that Robbie mentioned just from 65 west, it's phenomenal. I mean, and it's not getting any slower. And that would really improve our availability to the highway system, and also safety issues from the standpoint is, am I correct, every time they have to pull that plow on and off before they even go out on the road, if I've got that correctly?
We have strategically staged a few of our trucks so that they can be plows on. So those are a lot of times our first trucks out the door. But the majority of our other trucks that are in there do have to remove their plow. I forgot to add one thing. I was surprised in doing research for this. In 1994, our population growth since 1994 has been 76%. And I was surprised by that. I mean, I didn't realize that. So when we built this facility in 94, we were at about 54,000 people. So what's the next 20 years? And really what we're looking at with this is try to position the county so that 20 years from now, if they have to have a similar discussion, it's more, we can save this, do this, and provide the capacity for use.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Supervisor Shirley.
The way that I look at this, in an ideal world, yes, we would build this for years and years and years to come. Are we in a financial state, are our constituents in a financial state to do that right now? I'm not so sure about that. So if we can build something where maybe in 8 years we have to do an addition, I'm okay with that. I think that these multiple bond issues are going to come a real wear on the taxpayers really quickly here as we do this jail expansion as well. So my proposal would be to look at this as a $5 million ask and use that interest money from here to pare that down, so we're only asking for $3 million instead of 7.4.
We could do a couple of things at this point. I mean, Supervisor Shirley suggested a modification of it, but I think I'm going to just ask for a show of guidance to the administrator on the proposal as it's been presented to us, and we can talk further about other changes as we go through the board process, the committee process and board process further. So at this point, unless there's any other comments or questions, I'm going to... Okay. Supervisor Burning.
I mean, Supervisor Shirley just brought up a proposal, and that hasn't really been talked about. I think we should mull over this option, just because it's for discussion. That's why we're here. It becomes a lot more of a restricted communication process while we're going through this. This committee of the whole is for open discussion. So can we explore what Supervisor Shirley said before we lift our paddles?
Well, we said we weren't going to cut off any discussion, so we can surely discuss it. No pun intended. Supervisor Leaf.
I want the administrator to maybe explain how the debt service would work and the interest, if it can be applied to another project.
So the bond issue on the government center and any associated interest for that can be used on that capital project or any other capital projects. So right now, though, we have about 1.3 million in contingency. All the other money's been spent. So, I mean, there is 1.3 million that's available today. If you ask me next September, though, when the project wraps up, how much of that is left, that's what would be available for other projects.
Supervisor Rice, and then Supervisor Hanson.
I just wanted to comment that I think Supervisor Shirley's proposal is interesting and needs to be explored. I'm wondering if it's something that we could recommend back to the traffic committee and have them, you know, what we've seen is a pretty well thought out proposal, but essentially paring it down, I'd like to see what ideas they would come up with that would alter this.
I like the idea of leaving that money in reserve and giving the administrator the flexibility of seeing how things look closer to the end of the project before we make commitments for those funds. I prefer to have redundancies in the project at this early stage.
Supervisor Long.
I just want to acknowledge the Transportation Committee because they really fully vetted this issue, and they've been talking about this a long time, and I respect their decision to push this forward and move forward. So I think it's the right thing to do. As far as the contingency, this fall or sometime this soon, this whole bottom floor is going to get demoed, and we have no idea what we're going to run into. We need that contingency fund because we have, inevitably, we're going to run into something that we weren't expecting, and we're going to need that money to cover those costs. So I would really encourage us to move forward with this particular project as approved and presented by the Transportation Committee.
Supervisor Van Sumeren.
Thank you, Chair. I respect Mr. Shirley's consideration and concerns about spending, cutting, paring back the project. The only thing is, in my experience, and I've been the head of several building projects, if you put something off for a couple of years, that amount doubles. So if we take $2 million off now, and 2 million, and 2 years from now we want to add those niceties, whether it's the truck wash or whatever, that will probably not cost us $2 million to do that, but $4 or $5 million. So in the end, we end up spending more money. In the world of building, in the world of construction nowadays, the price seems to elevate so quickly that if you set something aside for even a couple of months, your price continues to increase. So I think the Transportation Committee has done a lot of research on this. We've pushed the pencil many different ways. I think this would probably be best for us to pass this now, get into it, do it now, and have it done with. Thank you.
Supervisor Ramberg.
Thank you. And yes, I appreciate looking at all these different options. And in the past and right now, I've seen this has been vetted through, 7 different options? And there's a lot of subject matter experts that were involved in this, and I was looking at it from afar. But years ago, the site was at a little boxed-in spot on, I think there's only a salt shed there now, on N and U. And then we moved it over to the 20 acres where the expandability is there, which we're experiencing. And so I echo Supervisor Van Zumeren's comments that we've had the subject matter experts look at this, and I propose we move forward as proposed.
If there, Supervisor Shirley.
I would agree that we shouldn't use our contingency on this building. I was unaware that the interest was already spent, which, I mean, I think I have issue with. Just in light of that, that means that we approved 80 million and we spent 82 if we spend all of that. So that's the separate issue I think that I have a huge concern with. But moving forward, I think even with that, I think that I'm not comfortable spending nearly 7.5 million. I think we need to shave some off of this.
If there are no further comments, I'm going to suggest we show our paddles for the $7.5 million proposal. There will be time for Supervisor Shirley and others to perfect their suggestions, get more questions asked over the next 2 months before we go final on this in September. And so at this point, I would suggest we raise our paddles of support for the opposition to the $7.5 million bond for the highway facility in Hudson. What was the vote?
16 to 1.
16 to 1. And with that, we'll take a 12-minute break, and we'll reconvene at 10:45. If folks could top off their coffee and return to their seats, we'll get underway in about a minute. Did that broadcast? Very good. Well, thank you, everybody, for a very productive first couple hours. Our next presentation is going to be a very important one, and the Deputy Sheriff, Brent Standard, is going to give it. We've heard this at the Public Protection Committee, and we have to kind of consider that what Brett's going to give us today is something that we won't vote on for 2 years. So it's really an informational briefing, and at the end of it, the only thing we're going to really do is ask, with a show of paddles, to suggest to Ken to keep this in mind and keep studying it, but this isn't any authorization for $50+ million bond 3 years out. Those votes will be 2 years from now. So we want to just keep that in mind when we hear from Brett. Just one other thing to capture. At this point, given where we kind of were on our first few votes, we're really down to an $8 million bond, because at this point, given the fact we need 15 votes for the Eckerd development, we don't have them. And so that $2 million probably at this point would not be in that bond presentation that we would make in December. However, there was a majority vote in favor of the pursuing the Eckerd development, and of course we have, given our conservative fiscal policies of the past, quite a sizable unassigned balance fund, and we could take monies from that possibly. Lots of things have to happen over the next few months. The audit has to occur, but we might want to just keep that in mind for the fall, that we might be able to fund the Eckerd Bluffs out of that unassigned balance fund without a tax increase for the citizens, but get that major project underway in some fashion. And again, I caveated that about 3 different ways. But again, we're down to basically $8 million on the bond now, with the possibility of still doing Eckerd. But what we're going to hear now is just an informational brief about what's something that we'll be voting on in 2 years. So with that, Chief Deputy, please share your thoughts.
All right, thank you. Good morning. It's still morning, right? The meeting will be done in morning? All right, we'll see. So we really started taking a serious look at the jail master plan about 3 years ago, when the planning started in earnest for the renovation of this building. We had asked Jim Ellsbury and the architects at the time to give us an architect estimate for what they thought the cost of a new pod would be, and at that time was about $30 million. So wanting to be responsible with that ask, we started to look deeper at what our need was, in realizing we had some anecdotal evidence of the direction we thought we were going. We commissioned an inmate study late last year to have somebody with the specialty come in and look at our jail population and give us a good idea of where's that population going, but more importantly, what are the needs that a new modern jail is going to need. As an example of that is kind of the modern standard is that 10% of your total capacity should be in receiving cells. When our jail was built back in '93 with 131 beds, we had 3 receiving cells, which we still have to this day. So you can tell how things have turned over the years. But for a little bit of background, right now our carrying capacity in the jail is 184 inmates. So we have 184 beds that we can house inmates. Now the state of Wisconsin suggests that you don't go up to 184. They suggest that you stay within about 80% of that number. So that puts that functional capacity at around 147 inmates. So for easy math, we'll say 150. So when we had the inmate study done up on the screen, you can see what the projection was, and we start to see that we anticipate we're going to start hitting 150 inmates around 2030 now. The average daily inmates that we have is starting to inch up around 126 at that time, but you always, as an averages, you have highs and you have lows. So we anticipate in 2030 we'll start seeing 150 inmates. And right now, today, we have 123 inmates in the jail. And at that level, you can start feeling the tensions rise in the jail. There's more infighting between the inmates. It becomes harder to separate inmates if they have issues with each other or other reason that we have to separate the inmates. So we anticipate that by the time we start consistently hitting 150 inmates, that we will have to start housing some of those inmates in other facilities. So right now, the average is around $65-ish a day per inmate. We anticipate by 2030 that'll be around $75 an inmate. So just as round numbers, for every 10 inmates that we have to house out of county, it will cost us about $22,000 a month to house them outside of our facility. So part of that was really driving how we constructed this master plan. And another key takeaway from the analysis was that 75% of our inmates are in and out of our doors in 4 days or under. So we have a huge amount of turnaround, which for our facility means that since we only have 3 receiving cells, a lot of those inmates get taken down to general population. There's a lot of movement in our facility because we can't house them quite appropriately. So one of the big takeaways from the analyst was you guys really need an intake center with a number. His suggestion was 28 intake beds. And his words was that would be a godsend for your facility to take the population pressure down away from the pods. So that's kind of really the driving force behind the master plan. Now our master plan goes out to 2050 with the last phase. It's a 4-phase process. The last phase is to build another pod. But when we got the engineering estimates back with the inflationary price of the pod in 2050, that doubled the price of the pod. So as part of the KIP process, we wanted to bring all of those numbers in so the board could discuss what our options are moving forward. But at the very minimum, probably around that 2030 period, we for sure need to be asking for a new intake area and special housing unit. Those 9 special housing unit cells that we built a few years ago, we use them every day. They're full every single day. And basically when a new emergency happens in the jail with a new inmate in crisis or something that's a little bit higher priority, we try to shuffle the lowest priority inmate that we can out of the special housing unit out of necessity. So I know there's a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer anything or give some more insight on the master plan. I'll pull up the rendition of the plan, which there's a lot here to unpack.
Questions for the Chief Deputy? Supervisor Leaf.
So I know you touched on it briefly, but you have to play Tetris with how you put people in the pods based on the type of inmate they are, which really necessitates some of this growth, correct?
Yeah, so when our pods were constructed, they're fairly large. We didn't have quite as many separation needs back in the 90s. It's only grown as society has changed. So some of them are hard line. You can't house a male with a female. We really try to separate inmates that are sentenced versus non-sentenced, and people that are still presumed innocent and are still going through their due process. We classify inmates from minimum, medium, and maximum security. We try at all costs to keep those inmates separated from each other. And then there's still a huge variety of inmates that might be co-defendants and sharing information back and forth with each other or playing each other, inmates that get in fights. So yeah, there's a huge separation issue that we're still trying to deal with, and hopefully a new intake center would give us some space to be able to accommodate that.
Just one other question. So having done the jail tours and inspections, the medical facility, I mean, is clearly aged, and it's clear that our inmates are coming in with more health needs than they have previously. So this does include improvement in that area, doesn't it?
Yes, there's a renovation of the medical spaces as well.
Supervisor Rice.
This is the first time I've seen this blueprint, so could you maybe walk us through what's new and what the options are here?
Sure. Hopefully you can see the mouse here. So the grayed out portion here in this, I don't know if it's an octagon, but shape is the existing pod area, and just below it you start to get into the medical area in here, and then next door to it is the kitchen area, and then down into the Huber area along in here. So everything basically on the left-hand side of the screen, in the whitest colors, it would be a new space. Everything on the right hand side of that in some of the teal and purple colors would be renovations. So this area in here, up on the top of the screen, would be a new booking receiving area with a new garage that could accommodate a bus if we had to evacuate the inmates without having to take them out into the open air. And just south of that is a special housing unit for medical or segregation type inmates, just because the need is still there and it continues to grow for those special inmates. So, and just south of that is trying to consolidate some of our operations a little bit more, is a release center and an area where the public can go drop off money, professional visits. Right now, there are 2 separate locations that professional visitors can enter the jail, through the main jail entrance or by the day report center area. So over the years, as we've added onto the jail a little bit, a lot of the operations have become disjointed and not quite as efficient as they had been. And then in the far left-hand side of the screen, it would be the new pod area. We've had a couple of different iterations of this plan, on the pod being on the north side of the building, kind of adjacent to the old pod. So that's still kind of in flux, but all the pieces are in this plan, just a matter of where each piece goes.
Supervisor Burning.
So we put this plan in motion. We build it out. What do we need FTE-wise to make sure that this new section is secure? So initially, because I know as you grow, you'll need more, but...
Right, so right now we have 30 FTEs that are staffing the floor. Next year with the referendum, we're getting 2 more in the jail. We anticipate that we would need 3 more on top of that to fully staff this build out. So it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be, and it's a little bit more doable, I think. So.
And the follow-up to that, so we would issue the bond next year, would it be, that we would vote to 2 years? Okay, so what year do you anticipate that this is going to be completed then?
Well, it depends on the phasing. If the board wanted to look at trying to do all the phases together to save some of the inflationary costs, the whole process would probably be done by 2033 or so.
Supervisor Leaf.
I had one more question after my last one more question. So part of one of the items in the KIP I know that we've been working on is some netting in the existing pod, because we had some inmates that were trying to harm themselves. I'm assuming that the new construction would have more safety for inmates and staff.
Yeah, that's incorporated as pretty much a standard feature on most jails these days. Some don't add that, but that's the base right now. So, and that project is still moving forward. We're going to start that in the fall.
As noted earlier, we're 2 years out from at least a final vote on the bonding on this. This was our first preliminary brief for the full body, and thank you very much for that. If there's any other questions, we'll take them. Otherwise, when we raise our paddles, the only thing I'm going to suggest they mean, we're not endorsing the $50 million plus or a time frame, but we're simply authorizing the administrator to, that we see the need and continue to monitor it and update it as necessary. But the PPJ committee will be following this closely for 2 years, and again, we'll all be voting on it several times in 2026, 2027. So if there's no further, I'm sorry, Supervisor Anderson.
Yeah, my one question is how long would we anticipate this build out to be sufficient for the county's demands?
Well, we commissioned the study to look through 2050. So the final pod was due to be constructed in around 2050. Looking at the numbers, I think it probably will be needed in the 2040s somewhere. So it should last well into the 2050s with that pod. Fingers crossed.
If there are no further questions, thank you again, Chief Deputy. And I would just suggest we, again, raise our paddles, but just in guidance to the administrator to continue to monitor the issue. And that's it. So we'll raise our paddles. Okay. We get to that portion of the meeting where Supervisor Witt will take us through what we normally have gone through in our KIP presentations, but we've asked him to focus on the new projects, the big projects, and he's got about 20 of them to go through, some of which we've seen before, some of which we've already discussed this morning, but it will hopefully take us about enough time to get out at noon. Administrator Witt.
All right, everyone ready for the speed round? All right. My hat on here. As you can see, it's got the thumbs up. Well, if it's a no vote, I have to do a cartwheel. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go over the highlighted projects. The projects that are unhighlighted just means that they're very routine in nature. You see them every year, or they're a small dollar amount. They're a few years out. You have seen them before. Anything that's highlighted is funded next year. It's a significant dollar amount, or you've never seen it before. If it has a red font for the project number, that's a giveaway right there that you have not seen it before. We're going to blow this up a bit. All right, so we can see them better. All right, so the first project on here, $400,000 next year, is for a solar array at the Baldwin Ag Center. So when we look at solar arrays, what we're looking at is being able to reduce our operating cost. So this investment in solar, and hopefully we can get some grants or some federal tax credits to further reduce this amount, but this is what the project cost is going to be able to help us reduce our operating costs. So anytime we can reduce our operating costs, that frees that money to be used for something else that's a need within the county. Any questions on that? Yep. Supervisor Hanson.
What's the return on investment? How many years?
We're looking at return on investments. If there's no additional funding, we're looking at, they look at about 25 to 30 years, which is probably a little long on solar panels. If we can get additional tax credits on there, though, we can get this as low as probably 5 to 10 years, and then it's a great deal.
The follow-on question would be, what's the useful life expectancy of the solar panels?
20 years. Any other questions?
Supervisor Van Summeren.
Yes, Administrator, and that's the problem. It's got a 25-year payback, and they're good for 20 years. And that's an issue. We live in an interesting place here in Wisconsin. We have some solar energy, but not a lot. We have some wind energy, but not a lot. And so I guess before I would say go ahead with this, I'd like to look at how much we're spending on energy in the Baldwin. Now, not only Baldwin, but also there's a $750,000 one for the government center. How much we're spending now and what the payback actually is. Because these have maintenance also. There's maintenance involved that sets that back not by months, but by years. Mm-hmm. I'm all for solar, but it has to pay for itself. Like anything else, any investment has to pay for itself. Otherwise, it's hard to vote for.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
And we are not proposing solar just because we're cost conscious. We're proposing, or environmentally conscious, we're proposing solar as a cost conscious effort. And so we're only proposing these if we can get that payback down onto that lower range. If the payback is longer than the useful life of it, we're not going to do the project. And so I just want to be upfront what the cost is on it. But there is a 30% federal tax credit that's available to us right now. So 30% of that is available to come back.
That is available to government because that never was not at one time available to any government entity. So
it is.
Okay, thank you.
So as long as that continues and that program's available to us, we're also going to apply for some grants on these. But as long as that option is there, that payback comes down to make it worthwhile. That's how come we have not done solar before, but it is up on our list now to actually do it.
Supervisor Barkle.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Administrator, what location are we looking for installing these? Is it rooftops or is it out in the field or?
Yeah, I don't believe we're looking at any rooftop ones currently. Yeah, no rooftop ones.
Okay.
There'd be standalone solar arrays.
Last year we visited Arizona and we saw them mounted on parking lots. So you had shaded parking lots and that was pretty neat. We should do
we've
that.
talked about that. We've heard about those.
Yeah.
Yeah. They also block the snow, I guess, too, which people
Not a bad idea.
Yeah. We haven't figured out how to harness snow energy.
That's right. And when they block the snow, they also block the light.
Yeah.
Maybe I could just ask the administrator, the next item up is also a solar panel item for a couple of years out. Why don't you handle that at the same time? And then would you like to handle the yellow paddles per item or after a category of items?
Yeah, it was really going to be per item, so hopefully a speed round is what I was thinking of, that concept.
Why don't you do the next solar panel, then we'll do the paddles.
All right. So the government center, we're looking a couple years out, but we're also looking at potentially solar panels for that. This is actually probably one of the top items for any contingency funds we have left over if Supervisor Shirley doesn't spend it somewhere else first. But the idea is that we can reduce our operating cost, and that's why we're looking at solar energy. So, solar panels.
Doug.
All right. Very good, thank you. Right. Yeah, if it costs us more than the payback period is, I'll pull the project. So, yeah. Yes, correct. The jail roof project. So there's a roof over the government center and the jail, and so that does wear out eventually. So we have an estimate about $1.6 million to replace that. So we moved it out. Actually, I think it had been on an earlier year, but we pushed it back to coincide with the other construction of the jail expansion. Just because that construction timing would make more sense if that's when we're going to do it. But $1.6 million, even if you don't do the other project, you're going to have to spend on the roof.
Supervisor Burning.
Yeah, are we going to include that in the bond that we do for the jail if we do that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. No, it's on the existing facility, not on the new one at all. Okay.
Is that just for the roof surface, or does that include the insulation?
Why didn't we put the
Just the roof surface? Yep. Yeah, it's amazing how expensive those flat roofs can be when you have to replace them. Yep. All right, paddle votes on a roof. You can just make sure you turn the paddles towards me so I can see what the vote is. All right, very good, thank you. 16-1, yep. All right, so the Government Center Clinic, we covered that already. So grand courtroom, out in the last year of the KIP here. So the idea is that there are certain court cases that have bigger media, bigger public involvement, and so they would build out one of the courtrooms upstairs into what they call a grand courtroom. It's just basically a bigger courtroom that has bigger capacity. And so if you had like a MU trial, you'd be able to house that trial in that space to better accommodate both the public and the media. So that's the concept behind it. Got a question over there by Van Sumeren.
Supervisor Van Sumeren.
So what happens if we don't build a grand courtroom? Do they move the trial someplace else, or if we do one, do they move other trials here? I guess what's the benefit of that for the county?
Well, it's the clientele that you're serving. I mean, it's the public that are trying to get access to that very crowded courtroom, or the media that's trying to get access to that so that it can be publicly shared. That's the reason behind it. That's the benefit. If they don't have it, they'll have to make do with the spaces that they have.
Supervisor Shirley.
So this would be one of the courtrooms that's not getting built out in this project?
So it's one of the 4 courtrooms upstairs. The 4 existing courtrooms upstairs have no remodeling work currently provided in them. So this would be a remodeling of one of those upstairs courtrooms.
Why are they calling it grand? Are they planning to use fancier appointments? Is this going to be like the Hyatt of courtrooms, or are they just making it bigger?
Yeah, I don't know about the naming of it. Did you name it, Taylor? No, Taylor says he didn't name it. Yeah, grand courtroom. I don't know where the name came from. That's what we've been calling it, though. It's a bigger courtroom space.
Could we actually put some stipulations on this, as long as we've still got the purse strings? Can we say, yeah, it can be the Grand Plain courtroom? Because I don't think we need to pay for Gentile type casework. Maybe, and when I say casework, I'm talking about trim. I'm not talking about anybody's briefs. I'd prefer it not to be fancy. It doesn't need to be fancy for the camera. Just if they want it bigger, bigger's okay. We could call it the bigger courtroom, maybe, instead of the grand courtroom.
Yeah. There's actually a little bit of psychology built into why courtrooms are designed the way they are, and that they have a fancier appearance to them. There's a psychology behind that for the people that are in the courtroom. And that's a true thing, but that's why they do it.
Yeah,
Supervisor Rice.
My recollection is that the last large trial we had here allowed for people to be in this building but view the trial remotely via technology and TV screens and things. And can I assume that that would continue to be the case whether we pass this or not?
Yeah, actually, conference room 1700 is set up as a media room. So once we finish the remodeling of this floor, that's what that room was specifically designed for.
Supervisor Bramber.
What do we anticipate the frequency of the use of it to be?
Well, hopefully never, right?
Right.
But, you know, so, you know, these larger cases, they come up and they seem to be coming up with more frequency recurring, which is unfortunate, but there's really no way of telling. It's probably statistically population driven. The larger our population gets, the more frequency you're going to have for those types of cases.
Supervisor Hanson.
All right, so this is a red line item. We have never seen this before. It's almost $1.5 million. For years, I've been listening to requests. We just spent $80 million building out an expansion to the courtroom, 4 new courtrooms, so that we can potentially add new commissioners and new judges. I'm spent. I can't put another penny into the court. I will not and cannot vote for this. Not $1 more million for the courts. I'm sorry.
I think we got a question by Anderson.
Supervisor Anderson.
Yeah, I guess I can see the logic for it. If this was for next year, I would definitely not vote for it. But for 2029, to see where we're at later, and I agree with the administrator that there is a reason the courtrooms are the way they are. So, like, just basically stuff is taken more seriously in the weight of the decision is felt. But whatever. Anyway, like, to what Supervisor Hanson echoed, like, it doesn't need to be above and beyond what the finishes we currently have.
Seeing no further questions, if we're prepared to show our paddles.
No. 3 to 14 is what I counted on that one. So normally I count the red paddles. I should have counted the green ones that time. It took me a lot longer. All right. So the next project up is a UPS for the CT scanner. So we found out by trial and error that CT scanners are very sensitive about energy fluctuations. And so unfortunately, this is a next year project, something that we need in order to protect the investment that we have in the CT scanner for the medical examiner.
Supervisor Van Summer and then Supervisor Barkalow.
Okay, so I see there's 2 choices here. One is one UPS that'll hold it for 15 minutes and one that'll hold it for 7 hours. Will it actually hold it? Will it actually run for 7 hours, or does it just keep it alive for 7 hours? That's a pretty large UPS if it's going to do that. And then wouldn't we be better off to do the 15-minute one and a backup power a standby generator to keep it going indefinitely?
That might be a Taylor question. Do you need the hat?
So, my understanding is that we'd probably be fine with the 7-minute. These are just power glitches in the building. It's not going to. I don't think Patty's going to keep running the CT scanner when the power's out.
So it's more of a power conditioner, really, than a standby. It'll hold it up, but it'll basically take the peaks and the valleys off.
Exactly.
Okay. So then the smaller one should do it
should
as well as anything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you're suggesting to reduce the cost of this to the lower cost unit? I don't have that number right in front of me. Someone have that?
It was 108.
It says 102 versus 145.
I guess I'll just ask the question, is there consensus on that then, or? Yeah, all right. Seems like consensus on reducing it. Overall for the project then, $102,000 for UPS for the CT scanner. Get us by for 7 minutes. All right, very good, thank you. I think that one was unanimous then. All right, DD build out for an autopsy suite. So right now we send the bodies over to Ramsey County and they do the autopsies over there. So the thought here is that if we had the space, that we would be able to bring the pathologist to us and do the autopsies here. And it would also allow other counties then, instead of shipping them all that much further, to bring them here and then contract to have the autopsies done here. So it would be a cost savings. for the total cost of our autopsies and then a potential revenue source, renting out the space to other counties to perform the same service. So we have it out there ways. It's a new idea, new concept that we're still vetting, but that's where we're at with it.
Supervisor Adams.
Thank you. The public protection.
Here, hand him mine.
Okay, so you hit the button and then you leave it alone. The committee had a briefing on this, and the amount of money that we're sending over to Ramsey County is quite a bit of money. And so whatever we can do to support our county residents with expedited actions in this area and keep the funds here in St. Croix County and allow other counties north, south, and east of us to use our services would be a benefit to St. Croix County. Thank you.
No other questions then? A vote on that? All right, thank you. That looked unanimous. All right, we also have OV electrical transformers, and those were over New Richmond, I believe, aren't they? Yeah, Orchard View. So electrical upgrades, those are things that occur over time. So this is a maintenance item at that point in time. Questions? Yep. Supervisor Anderson?
Are we confident these would last 5 years if they're making a noise already? Would we want to move this up to
Taylor
1 or 2
looks
years?
non-confident.
Okay. I would
When do
say.
you want to move it up to, Taylor? He would do them tomorrow if he could.
60s, 70s. I feel like we should do this like next year or the year after.
Yeah. At least once you've authorized the funds within a budget year, the staff then has the discretion to act on the project, or they can actually delay the project. Really, a KIP project can last for a couple of years before you exercise it.
Yeah. I would recommend that we move this to next year. If they're making noise already, you're kind of gambling. Yeah.
All right. Consensus to
I
move it to
remember when
25?
we had one go out in this building, and it was a real hassle.
Yes.
Yeah, we could amend the budget to do it this year.
Well, the first step would be to move it to 2025. It seems like there's consensus for that. Taylor's convinced you. All right. The project moved to 2025. All right. 16-1. That's because you wanted it sooner than that?
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may. Mr. Vice Chair, Chair, if I may. I would recommend we look at doing a budget amendment to move this to this year if they're being noisy already, so at least they have the option to replace these this year if possible.
Yeah, making them and getting them in place is going to be.
He can place an order for him. Once the KIP is approved, he'll place the order for him. It'll take that long to get them anyways.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we're moving on. Taylor's off the hook here for a little while. Let's see. We have election software and server upgrade 5 years out for the county clerk. $40,000. Everyone likes the county clerk. Yep. Except for Barkalow. 16-1. All right. Hudson Highway Shop, we already talked about that one. We'll move on from that. All right. Law enforcement has 3 new projects out towards the end of the KIP life here, 5 years out. Sheriff Night Vision. So it's an enhancement to equipment that they have, $147,000. Questions on what that is? Supervisor Barklow.
Are we talking like
Supervisor
helmet,
Barklow.
night vision, or?
I'll bring the sheriff
Yeah.
up. He can describe it probably
I'm sure
better.
it'll be fantastic.
Just a flash.
Now, if I said he's right, that would be, so, yeah, no, they are helmet mounted. Currently, we have one tube for one eye. Looking out, then it's kind of the two tubes. And these were purchased in 2012 after an officer-involved shooting that was at night. So these have come in handy over the years for our operations. And the one tube ones will go on to patrol. These two tube ones will be more for the SWAT team.
Any other questions on that? Battles? All right, that looked unanimous. All right, so the next one up is the forensic server replacement. This is a specialized computer that they use for forensic work. It's on a rotation, really, for replacement, and it's coming up in 2028. All right, that looked unanimous. All right, the next one then is a virtual reality training simulator. And what I can say about law enforcement is it's one of the fastest growing areas for lawsuits. So any additional training that we can do to make our officers better, you know, probably will pay dividends in the long run. But it's $100,000 5 years out. Questions on what this looks like? Bring the sheriff back up. Yeah. So the question was, why 5 years out then? For one thing, I yell at them when they come up with a new idea and they say they need it tomorrow.
We could use it sooner. Part of what this new technology, though, is letting others vet out the issues as technology changes. So like River Falls, they had put in probably 3-4 years ago when they redid their office, they have a virtual simulator. However, theirs is static, so it's not moving. The person stands there in front of a screen. Now, the new technology is you've got the headset, you're moving, there's barriers or give you borders. So it's just getting that technology and then a location for it. Right now, the DD building we're going through some renovations with certain areas and training areas. So we anticipate that this would fit, if that consistently stays and working through the bugs, would fit very nicely in a couple years.
So
Supervisor Ramberg.
there's potential then that we could actually go to have other counties come in and train on our system? Or is that pretty much everybody's getting it now?
No, not everybody's getting it. We actually went down to Dakota County to see their setup, and that was the closest for this system in this area. Might be a few more over in the Twin Cities, but it's a technology that somewhat is cost prohibitive for the smaller ones, but this would be not just our agency. All the agencies within St. Croix County would be coming up there to utilize that and surely open it up to the surrounding counties as well, since we have drug task force that are multiple counties. We have teams, so this would be kind of a regional training.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I do have a little experience with that one at the Highway Department. Years ago, we had a semi come with training in it, and it had different modules. I think we had an ambulance in it, a snowplow, a police car, and I was very impressed with it. All these screens around you, and if that's the type it is, the only issue we had was those that have this motion sickness, they get more dizzy than normal. But I think there's a there's a way to accommodate that through this. Does this, my question is, does this have other modules that you can purchase in the future for other training, for other departments?
Yeah, it's from my understanding of the one, and I had also gone down to Dakota County, so there was about 6 of us that had gone down there, and we each tried that out, and yeah, it was, and the way technology is, it will absolutely be additional.
Is this going to give you are you going to get bills for software? Is this going to be expensive to maintain?
This one that we're looking at, there are some that have that yearly maintenance. I believe this one that we're looking at is you buy it, it's yours. If you want to expand, then you order others. But as far as yearly maintenance, I believe that this one is you buy it, it's all yours.
Supervisor Burning.
I'd like to make a recommendation. I mean, quite frankly, this dollar figure on this 5 years out for something that we're looking at right now is probably just there to have it on there. Is that reality? Because this stuff is changing so quickly. Every day there's something new coming out. So what I would ask the administrator to do is take a look at it for something that we could have it be useful for the highway department, for driving simulations, for law enforcement, so that it's a multi-use project, not just for law enforcement. I just think that would be something that we could buy into 5 years from now, because we just really don't know what the price tag is going to be per se, or what you decide on 5 years from now. What it is today isn't going to be what you're looking at Dakota County isn't necessarily 4, 5, 6 years from now going to be the same thing necessarily. So that's just my recommendation. But
you thought you were wrong, but you were mistaken. All right.
So Ken,
virtually reality
Ken, I
training.
think you were agreeing with what Supervisor Burning was saying, that
Yeah.
you try to make it to several different groups and work toward that goal. So that's what we'll be raising our paddles on.
Yep, that's a good idea. We'll see if there's a product like that that's out there. So, yep. All right, that looked unanimous. All right, so next up, and I'll take maybe project 10100 and 10159 together. They're both related to the jail. One is appliances and the other is a dishwasher replacement, which I know that's an appliance also. But they're both replacement of capital items within the jail. So 115,000 next year, another 13 the following year. All righty. Clean dishes will be had. All right. Next, we get into emergency communications. Oh, Terry's still with us. Good. All right. So next year, we have a couple of projects coming up. We have network switches, radio infrastructure. We also have portable radio cache update. So, you know, 273,000 and 80,000. If you have any questions about specifically what that stuff is, Terry's here to answer those questions. But it's replacement of infrastructure that we currently have. Yep, package deal on those two. All righty. Next up then, we have 3 years out, $2 million for the Hammond Tower. So we have a lease on that tower currently. That's a tower that was at the highway shop. We sold it off when we sold the highway shop because it sits kind of in the middle of that parcel. So the options that we have is we potentially can extend that lease, but we also need to look at the structural integrity of the tower, of whether it's going to continue to be viable. I think it's 30 to 40 years old now. So it's an older tower. So between now and 2027, what we want to do is we want to do the structural integrity test on it. have an engineer look at it, and then if we can negotiate an extension, this project will come off. But if it doesn't, and we have to build a new tower somewhere in the Hammond area, you're looking at a $2 million project. So it's integral to having radio communications across the county. Yeah, I think Hammond says they're the heart of the county. So. Yeah. All right. Next, we have $60,000 next year for radio consulate replacement. So these are the consoles that are down in the 911 dispatch center. All right. Unanimous.
Everybody's getting tired.
It's okay.
All right, 3 new projects. One of them in the first year, which I probably yelled at Terry about when he did that. But $160,000 for the 911 system replacement. This is hardware within that system. Yeah, and it looks like that's going to end up being on a 5-year rotation to replace that infrastructure. So I guess we'll take that one first, and then maybe the next 2. Everyone always takes it so easy on Terry, except for the sheriff. All right. All right, coming up then 5 years out is a radio base station, antenna and coax replacement. Was this for a specific location or basic? That's all 14 of the tower sites. So if you remember a number of years ago, we built a whole bunch of towers, cost a whole bunch of money. It's coming time now to replace those. It must have been about 10 years life on those?
15 life approaching.
Yep. So again, part of the cost of running a county is maintaining the infrastructure. And the 911 communication center is integral to public safety. And yes, it's very expensive, but these are the types of things that are recurring within our KIP. Do you have any specific questions about what this entails? It's 14 different tower sites across the county, though. All right. Yep.
Yeah. Is that King Tower, the King Plant Tower coming down? And when, if it is, when, and is that included in this?
So I don't know the exact date, but we are no longer on that site. Back in 17, we built the tower up in Holton, so that's where we are at now.
Yep. The last one here under Terry's section is a UPS replacement for the Hudson and the Baldwin 911 centers. All right, very good. All right, on to parks. So the first one I have here is the additional phases of the St. Croix County Loop Trail system. These are going to be partially funded. We're writing grants for these, 80% grants. So the $950,000, the $1 million you see there's the total cost of the project. When we look at the revenue section down below, you see the 80% offsetting matches to that. So really about $200,000 in 2026 is our portion of that project. And so it's a good investment if we can get the 80% grant match. And if we don't get the 80%, you know, we probably won't do those. I'll take that back a little bit because I think the third phase wasn't going to be grant eligible, right?
We're going to try to make eligible based. So
All right.
we have gotten the grant for the 2026 one.
Yep.
7.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got the grant, just repeat what Jason said. We got the grant for the 2026 project already, and he's going to try to split the other one out there in 2028 to make it grant eligible. So, bike ped. All right, unanimous support for that. Supervisor Otino's coming around. All right. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we have Glen Hills, 9 camping cabins with infrastructure. That dollar amount is in red because we dramatically reduced, I think we shaved about $1 million off of that project. Dramatically reduced the scope of that project. And so it's still on the list for $600,000 for the camping cabins, but at a reduced price. Any questions on that? I think we have a question by Anderson.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but the plan is to have a lot, like the local, like some high schoolers and stuff help build these as part of their school projects.
Yeah, so we reduced the overall cost of the project because right now we've got 2 camper cabins out at Glen Hills, and we would take and look at building the cabins as demand increases for them instead of going from 2 to 11 camper cabins in 1 year. So that $600,000 is basically putting in the drives, the sewer, the water, that kind of stuff that we would need to do, and then we would build the cabins with normal budget.
All right. Yeah, Jason's been doing a good job of reworking some of these ideas that we have. It's good to have the fresh ideas. All right, that was unanimous. Crowd's getting a little rambunctious. All right. So the next one on there, a project, 700,000, 5 years out. It's the 20-site RV campground for larger RVs with infrastructure. I think we pushed this project back. It's been on the list since 2022, but we pushed it further back. Just as we work on other park infrastructure and improvements, they did a lower priority for this, extended the time of when we think we would need it. All right. I had 14 to 3 on that one. All right, the next 2 projects then are fairly routine, but they are coming up next year, brand new projects. One is the community developments plotter. I think should be 2 T's in there. But the floater scanner for 16, and then county dam, we have 50,000 coming up next year, and then I think we added the 50,000 out in 2028 because there's multiple dams in the county that we're responsible for maintaining. But otherwise, they're actually fairly routine items. Are there any questions on them? All righty. Yep.
So I was just asking, how many dams do we have in the county? And are they all pretty relatively structurally sound? I mean, we've seen images of all the heavy rains going on in other parts of the country where dams fail. So I'm just making sure we have structural integrity.
So yes, we've got basically 10 earthen dams and then the Glen Hills Dam. And so that 50,000 for 2025 is to actually do some work on the gate at the Glen Hills Dam on Glen Lake. And then we have been working with the NRCS engineers on our other dams, and they go out and do inspections. And so that one that's out there in 2029, we got some dredging that we need to do upstream of our dams to make sure that they can still operate at the capacity that they need to. And then also we've got some issues that we're monitoring as far as the outlet pipes and that, and some movement over time with frost that we might need to take and do some repairs on.
So much like DOT has special dollars set aside for local bridges and whatnot, Does the DNR have anything for these types of maintenances? No, nothing like that. Okay.
Only for dam removal, nothing for dam maintenance. And so, we are going out every year and we are maintaining little stuff all the way down to the animal holes and that have a washout down the road. So that's kind of what it is, but they are inspected yearly. We are responsible for mowing them and maintaining them, so.
Supervisor Hanson.
Just for interest in the history, how did we come to be responsible for these dams?
I believe that they're mainly flood mitigation measures, and most of them are over by Glenwood City, and they were built by our land conservation department as a county, so.
Is there a relationship then, or was there with the Army Corps?
I believe there was permitting and that, and maybe Army Corps designed them, but yeah, they were county built.
All right, that wraps up the speed round of the KIP projects. So I'll note then at the bottom here, what we're looking at is the total project cost and the funding sources. So for 2025, we have $13 million of projects. I don't believe any of the projects were necessarily cut. There was not enough votes on the Eckerd Bluffland Park development. It was 10-7 to qualify for a bond issue. So what I would recommend is that we pull that out of the bond issue. Really the question then is, do you leave that in and apply more fund balance to still do that project, or do you push that project back? That's the question that I have right now, so that we can create a recommendation to the admin committee and we can bring back a plan then that will have enough votes for success.
What is our current fund balance and what is like?
Yep, so the current fund balance is about 5.8 million going into the year. So I have it at the bottom here. So I project a 5.8 million fund balance in the KIP at the beginning of the year. Using 3 million of it, having the county still replenish part of it, we'd end up with 4 at the end. If you look out 5 years, that does slowly draw down into the negatives. So not bonding for that 2 million is going to change that bottom line by $2 million all the way across. We'll run out of money about 4 years out.
But we have that, what's it called? The, what am I thinking of? Undesignated fund balance that usually ends up transferring into there too. But how much is
That's the
this
1.5
budget?
million
Yeah, I see.
transfer from general fund. So I anticipate about 1.5 million per year going back into the KIP from that. So that's with that built in.
I would say if we're gonna not bond for that, then I would look for a pared down version of that, the minimalist, to get the entry in, a small parking lot, whether it's the permanent one or not, just to get started out there, and leave it at that.
Yeah. You know, staff has looked at that project of scaling that down, and as Jason was talking about, really the problem is once you scale it down, you're probably spending more money to move the infrastructure later if you're going to develop it the way that the park is planned to be developed. And so it's hard to say, well, we're going to put a parking lot here, okay, and then in 2 years or 5 years or whatever, we're going to tear that parking lot out and build a new parking lot back here. If you're going to do it, I just recommend that you do it the right way the first time, and if you want to delay that, then delay it. But don't do it halfway. So this is already scaled back from the 17 million, so. Well, that's what I'm asking you. I'm asking you if you want to delay the project out of 2025, or if you want to just still do it, but take it out of fund balance instead of the bond issue. I think those are the two questions I have for you right now, or options.
If I may, I think the safer thing at this point would just be to delay it for a year, and we may find something along the way that works out better and we can move it up. But I think for purposes of this KIP and 2025, if we just try to delay it a year, and then we'll figure out how to pay for it.
All right, so the question is delay for 1 year? All right, that was 10 to 7. Okay, so the changes that I'm going to be making.
Ken, just real quickly, I think just a question, I think what we did is delay for 1 year and put in 2 million a year out.
Correct, yeah. So what I would do is I would change, I would push the 2 million back to 2026 and then 1 million per year thereafter. So just push it all back by 1 year.
And what was the vote on that,
That
by the
was
way?
10 to 7 to
7,
delay.
okay.
Okay, so the changes that I'm going to be making to this, just to summarize, so we're looking at an $8 million bond issue in 2025. I'm not even going to get into the 27 bond issue because that's several years off. That's actually the next county board that'll vote on that. But just knowing that there's a big project out there is helpful. I'm moving the OV electrical transformers up to 2025. I'm reducing the UPS unit for the CT scanner from 145 to 102. And then we're going to push the Eckert Blufflands back by 1 year, reducing the bond issue to 8 million. I think that's all that I have on there. Oh, the grand courtroom, I was deleting that line item. That did not have enough votes to stay on the plan. So that is the recommendation as I understood them today. So what I would like to do, Vice Chair Fiedler, is ask for a vote to recommend, just so we can test out the voting system. So if anyone's still in. You have 7 minutes. All right, so who would like to make a motion to recommend the plan that I just laid out?
I will make a motion to recommend the plan that we laid out.
All right. Yep, so we're going to get a motion in a second.
And I would support.
All right. All right, so we're going to walk around. I think John's going to come, maybe Adam's going to come up. And we're going to help you walk through this so that we get this down. So next month at the August County Board, this is how you're going to be voting. So, yeah, you're not going to have paddles at the county board meeting. So, all right. So we have a motion. We have a second. Not the paddles. They'll be used for the committee of the whole in future years. I want those back.
What is the question? Consideration capital improvement.
I never got you allowed to. We'll figure that out. All right. For the viewing public, this is what the screen's going to look like. So when you guys have an item, consideration of capital improvement plan, it will display the votes results once they're completed. for you. All right, so that seems to be a failure.
Can we take a voice vote?
Yeah. All right. So County Clerk, are you able to fill in the remaining votes if they are not able to? All right. Yep, so why don't you finish the vote progress? We'll display it. Is there anybody that wanted to vote no that was not able to vote? Otherwise, we'll mark you as a yes. Not seeing any. Any votes that are not recorded will be yes votes.
So does that conclude the voting then? Do we?
We're waiting. Please stand by. The vote results should be displayed on the screen once they're tallied. In theory.
I tell you, while we're waiting for the final vote count, is there any, 15 to 1-1.
All right.
Okay, the final vote on recommending the KIP recommendations was 15 to 1. One abstention.
Yep. There's the abstention from Supervisor Hanson. Supervisor Anderson voted no. Yep. All right.
To the administrator. A request for future agenda items. Supervisor Rice.
There are several residents here today, and some have emailed and called me in advance of this. They'd really like to see on our agenda in the future a status report or in-depth understanding of the due diligence process we're doing with the senior home and rehab facility. They'd like to know more about where we're at with that.
Chairman Long.
We're planning on having an additional committee, the whole meeting, probably late August, where we'll be reviewing the data that we're currently gathering so that everybody will have the information. And then at that point, we're planning some sort of a forum to make sure that the public can have not only input, but have the ability to ask questions as well. So it'll be a very open, transparent process to make sure that not only the board gets all the information that we're pulling together, but the public is involved in that as well. Does that help?
Thank you. I think just my follow-up is if there's an opportunity to contribute I used to do due diligence for investments, so if there's an opportunity to contribute to our data set of what we're trying to collect, I would appreciate that opportunity.
Any other requests for future agenda items? Seeing none, any announcements? Seeing none. The date of our next meeting is scheduled. Now you said August, but you meant October, right?
Pick a date.
In October.
Well, no, in August, okay. We were looking at a date, possibly the last week of August, to have a committee of the whole to discuss the health campus. Is there any particular suggestions? Usually Tuesdays or Thursdays.
And then time. Do you want to do that in the evening because it's more public oriented?
Yeah, we should do late afternoon at 5 o'clock rather than in the morning. Let's say, we could say Tuesday the 27th is a possible day. I see thumbs up. Yeah, show your paddles.
So the suggestion is Tuesday, the 27th at 5 p.m. for
5
the next
p.m.
committee of the whole
Tuesday the
meeting.
27th.
Okay, that's the next date for the next meeting. Any other suggestions on the meeting? Because the one following that would be in October, on date to be determined and time. 5 p.m. For the August meeting. Okay. 27 August. So next meeting, committee of the whole, 27 August, 5 p.m. Next meeting after that in October for further consideration of the budget. With that, seeing no other hands in the air, we're adjourned. Thank you.